Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My marriage feels like it's on life support, and I'm starting to wonder if it's time to pull the plug. My spouse has made it clear that cheating on me is on the horizon, even threatening me with it, leaving me to spend the past year constantly on edge, bracing for when it might happen. People keep telling me, just file for divorce, it's emotional abuse. Or, stop whining and leave already. But the thing is, I love him. We've been through so much just to be together. And the thought of becoming another failed marriage statistic at 35 is crushing. On top of that, I still dream of having more kids with him, so you can imagine the struggle I'm facing. We met back in college, both attending the University of Georgia sometime in the early 2000s. We were both studying to become veterinarians, a program UGA is known for. I went into small animal care, while he focused on livestock. But after a couple of years, he realized his true calling was in long-haul trucking, and he left the vet program. Now, he delivers pork chops on an express route to Las Vegas, and the man is a machine. He manages the run in under 24 hours every time. He once told me, "Honey, I never drive faster than I can see." Besides that, it's all in the reflexes. Even after his career change, which I fought against and lost, we certainly aren't hurting for money. Anyway, as I said, we met at A&M in Bryan, Texas. I had been rather sexually active, but I had cooled it for the last few months while I looked towards my future. I had scouted out a couple of likely candidates, both around 5 feet 10 inches with swimmers' bodies and, what I could tell through their genes, reasonably well equipped. I ended up picking Jack and set about the conquest. Like I said, I was not a virgin, but it's easy to fool people about virginity. You just act clumsy, and for girls you lie and claim it hurts. Nobody checks anymore. This isn't the Middle Ages. Jack certainly didn't pick up on it, so my ruse was successful to a point. The failure was in the fact that while the pill was being used, it was accidentally contravened by antibiotics due to a sinus infection. So just after I got my diploma, my water broke and we had to go to the delivery room. Yeah, if you didn't pick up on it, I'm Mrs. Burton now. Or at least I still am for the moment, depending on where we go from here. My name is Gracie. Our daughter's name is Margaret, although she prefers Margot. She is most definitely her daddy's girl. We don't get along well. I think it is because we both are schemers. All throughout our marriage, I have been occasionally unfaithful. I simply can't help it. I have a sex addiction, and Jack is not up to my level in the bedroom. I didn't marry him for that anyway. I married him because he was easy to control and because he was going to be a good earner. Maybe that sounds cold to you, but then you probably live in a trailer and drive a Ford. I drive a Mercedes and live in a mansion. If you chose to settle or didn't prepare for the future, don't judge me. Jack has never cheated on me. He used to be like an adorable puppy that followed me around. I taught him everything in the bedroom. Thankfully, he bought my claim that I learned it all from the internet. I say that he isn't up to my level in bed, but he is damn close now thanks to my training. Of course, since that fateful day a year ago, he has also been willing to throw some plain old hardcore screwing my way, which might be why I am so sad at our possible dissolution. You see, everyone gets caught at some point. In my case, while I was out getting serviced by a hung Dominican national on a student visa, that my daughter was screwing me behind my back. The little brat skipped school and filmed my sex session in high definition on the camera phone I bought her. God, I should have had her aborted. But she did lock Jack to me while we were younger and in doubt. Decisions, hindsight is never helpful when you need it. When I got home that day, I saw her smirk at me and run upstairs. It was then that I walked into the living room and straight into a nightmare. On the TV was my most recent sexcapade. Jack was seated in front of it with tears streaming from his eyes and keening sound emanating from his chest. As I proceeded to make love to the huge man on the screen, my husband self-destructed slowly in front of me. I was frozen. My mind told me to run over and snatch out the power cord to the power supply for the entertainment center, but my body was in shock. In a perfect world, even at this stage my husband would have been happy to see me perform like the scene that played in front of him. Then we could have just had an understanding. But that was not to be, as he finally leapt up and threw the remote into our very expensive UHD flat screen. His head swiveled like a turret to face me. His eyes met mine, and all I could see was blind rage or hatred. I couldn't tell for sure which. Jack, I can explain. It was... Yeah, it was an accident or an act of God, right? I thought I knew the difficulties between men and women, how it seldom works out. Yet I kept trying like a fool. His hands were clenching and unclenching. His breathing was erratic. For the first time since I had met him, I actually felt fear that he might hurt me. Strangely, it sounded like he wasn't surprised by my affair, but I didn't have time to contemplate it. Instead, He ran into the garage and I heard his truck start up, an old Ford that he kept in running condition. He always joked it gave him farm cred when he used to go out and service his animal patients. Even when he gave up being a vet, he kept that stupid pickup. Directly after that, I heard the automatic garage door start to open, and before I could race out into the driveway, I could see through the glass of the front window that he was peeling out into the residential street. Please, God, let him wear his seatbelt, I heard. My spawn was on the stairwell glancing out the picture window as well. What the hell do you care? You did this to him. I shouted. What do you mean I did this to him? My hopefully soon-to-be ex-mother. I didn't screw a guy almost young enough to be my child while married to a man that only thinks rainbows and puppies come out when I pass gas. You are so monumentally naive. What an evil little bitch I raised. I needed her out of here. I started to put together a plan to salvage my life, and the first step was to ship the prude off to her grandparents. After I confiscated her phone, of course, and destroyed the disc she had burned for her father to watch. You are going to visit your mama and papa. I would advise you not to mention any of this to them. You no longer have any proof, and I can certainly make life extremely difficult for you while you still live under this roof. You are crazy if you think I can't control your father once he calms down. So, my loving daughter, fruit of my loins, don't screw with me. I screamed at the end. She ran upstairs, scared I thought, but then I didn't know about the cloud at that point. Stupid computers. A day passed. My daughter was safely stowed away where she couldn't hurt me further, and my husband finally came home. His eyes were red, and he looked like he hadn't yet slept. I had rubbed my eyes furiously when I heard him pull up and I hadn't changed clothes. After some artful arrangement, when he came into the living room, it also looked like I was in drastic shape. I carefully breathed out in a little girl's voice, "Please forgive me. I must have had a breakdown. I don't know what came over me for me to let it happen." His look was cold, even though his pain. His look was full of some unfathomable emotion. I slowly rose and wrapped my arms around him, but I noticed he didn't return the gesture. He simply stood like a fence post or a tree, unbending. I failed you, us, and our daughter. I can't fix what I did. I still love you and I won't fight it if you want to leave me. I took a calculated risk. It could go either way, but I think the odds were definitely in my favor. He finally spoke. Would you stop rubbing your body up against mine? Because I can't concentrate when you do that. I'm tired and I need more time to think without your influence. I'm going to go sleep in the bedroom for a bit, with the door locked, so you need to get whatever you need out of there and go to the spare bedroom. Good. He didn't bite on the divorce gambit. I ran upstairs and grabbed some things from the closet and master bathroom, then carried them into the spare bedroom down the hall. As I was coming back, I heard the lock click on the door. I tapped on the door lightly. Jack, can we at least talk soon? We can talk in the morning. Sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. If I'm not awake by dawn, call the president. Now was the hard part. I needed to look even worse, so I avoided drinking water or eating. I messed up my hair further and stuck my finger down my throat so I could vomit up a bit of fluid onto my sundress. Some snot carefully applied also added to the look. Additionally, I placed a glass of straight vodka near me and put a little Vaseline on the back of my hand. I forced myself to stay awake through the rest of the day and night to increase the appearance of weariness. When Jack came down the next morning, I quickly rubbed some of the Vaseline on my teeth to help keep my lips open in kind of a rictus grin. I also splashed a couple of drops of the remaining vodka in my eyes to create redness and tears. It hurt, but it was necessary. I could see he looked worlds better, even though he was still devastated. Even better was the clear concern in his face over my appearance. He still loved me. I had a shot. Jesus, Grace, you look horrible. Let's get you to bed. He picked me up and carried me to the main bedroom. Score. I sobbed into his shoulder as he brought me into the room and laid me down. It was even better when he laid down next to me and started talking. You hurt me, Grace. You really shook the pillars of heaven. But I don't want you to hurt yourself. Mom called and said that they were taking care of Margot, so we need to talk. He looked uncomfortable, but he continued. I thought about this real hard. I mean harder than I ever thought in my life. I think I might be willing to give you another chance, but you need to get counseling on your problems. There is one more thing. Anything, love, I swear. Hush, he almost shouted. I guess he wasn't as over it as I thought. There is one more thing, Grace. You probably won't like it, but I need you to feel the soul-ripping pain you put me through. I can't tell you when it will happen, but sometime in the future I am going to sleep with another woman and film it. If you want this, us, to work going forward, you will have to watch me have sex with someone. We will be even then. I was shocked, for real. I had created a monster out of my loving spouse, and he was determined to savage me. The mere thought of him doing to another female what I did to my lovers was almost more than I could bear. But I needed him. I had to suffer through this for my life to get back to where it was. I just want you to know also that before we have sex again, you need to be tested for STDs. After I get my revenge at some point in the future, I will do the same. In the interim, assuming we do become intimate again, I will be wearing condom. With my trust issues right now, I can't put it past you to try and conceive another child to try and tie me to you further. I understand, Jack, my love. I don't want to feel the same pain, but I will to keep you. I'll suffer through anything for that. I thought it was a bit hammy, but you gotta do what you gotta do. We settled into an uneasy routine over the next few months. My demon child returned to a home where she couldn't understand why we weren't divorced. I simply smirked at her and reminded her that I ran this family. She didn't challenge me directly again after that. Counseling was a breeze as well. I simply blamed an addiction to sex. The doctor ate it up and regurgitated it to my hubby like he was a baby egret. The problem was, as I mentioned before, my husband went out of his way to screw me silly. He took control of the bedroom, right out of my grasp. I wondered every time he took me if he had learned his new passionate techniques from another woman. When we didn't have sex because he claimed to be ill or tired, I fretted. Was tomorrow the day I would get to see him ravishing some 304 and then possibly falling in love with her? The sum effect was devastating. I lost all of my confidence as the year progressed. I couldn't risk an outside liaison getting back to my husband, so I was reliant solely on him. I pined when he didn't show me attention. I lost weight and I wasn't fat to begin with. Even my hair lost its sheen and became brittle. People at work told me I looked like I had gone through a shock and aged 10 years. I couldn't sleep. My joints hurt. Maybe I was prematurely aging? Worst of all, I began to obsess over and really love my husband. I had nothing and he had everything. Every day I waited for my world to be ripped away from me and, like some evil priest from a movie, for my Jack to gleefully cackle and thrust his hand into my chest to tear out my still beating heart. My scheme had backfired worse than a winter attack on Russia. Who would have thought that the master schemer would fall into a trap of her own making? Finally, almost a year to the day, I could take it no longer. I decided to remove the plug and see what happened. I sent my daughter to her grandparents again and resolved to have it out with my loving husband. He needed to shit or get off the pot, or I was leaving. Even though I truly loved him, for the first time really, I could suffer no further. Jack, I can't take this anymore. I need you to hurry up and find this other woman, have sex with her, and let me watch the tape so we can get past this. He simply looked at me. I felt a cold, creeping sensation crawl across my body as I realized the look was the same as the one he gave me a year ago. The gaze an insect collector has when he sees a particularly interesting bug he wants to collect, or possibly the feverish glance of a young sociopath burning ants with a magnifying glass. What had I wrought in my actions? You really think I would stoop to your level, Gracie? He said in a cool voice. I noticed he used my full given name, something he never did as he preferred the moniker Grace. I never intended to do what I told you. All I did this past year was to destroy you. I wanted you to finally love me, so that when you could take no more of the worry and doubt, you would give me an ultimatum. He stood and went into his study. I heard the turn of a key in a lock, and he came back with a large envelope. You can sign these, or not, I don't care. We've come full circle, you and I. I no longer care one iota about you, and you love me with everything you have. I couldn't care if you became a crack hooker downtown and sold yourself to vagrants, while you don't want to deal with the worry of me sleeping with one woman for vengeance. You see, you now feel what I felt. You know what it feels like to wonder every day if the one you love is going to throw away that love and trust for a simple sex. When I went away to think, I never intended to resolve anything. I simply wanted to hurt you as deeply as I could without physically torturing you. I looked at the papers he handed me, divorce papers signed and dated just under 1 year ago. My tears blurred out the specifics, but they didn't really matter at this point. There was one chance, Gracie, one. If sometime during the year you came clean, quit trying to pass this off as some mental issue, and actually apologized, we might have reconciled. But you didn't. You prevaricated and tried to con your way out of it, like I suspected you would. I'm not stupid, Gracie. I've had my suspicions for a long time, and I'm fairly certain that student wasn't your first outside man. I let it go because of our daughter, and because I loved you then as much as you love me now. In any case, we're done. Sign the papers if you like, but get your stuff and leave. Margot is staying with me. She is old enough to choose now, and that means I get to keep the house until she graduates. You make more than me, So good luck on getting alimony. Shoo now. Margot will be home soon and I don't want you here. I was Frankenstein, gazing upon his creature after it murdered his friend and wife. I doubted I would die of pneumonia anytime soon, but I was as dead inside as the creator of Mary Shelley's monster. He had planned all of this. I even had to wonder if his suspicions and plans had begun around the time he decided to become a trucker. It certainly offset the amount of money made between us and screwed up my chances to use alimony as a weapon to delay the divorce. He was also correct that my daughter was old enough to be heavily weighted as a factor in where she would reside custody-wise. Truthfully, the settlement was more than fair. With him making less money and most likely becoming the custody holder, I could have been forced to pay him alimony. I still could have taken it to court, tied everything up for months or years, but the sheer economic cost of having a lawyer for that long made it foolhardy. Since I had few options, I reluctantly signed the papers then and there, gathering a few things before I left. I would just have movers get the rest. They were only possessions, after all. What I really wanted I could no longer have. My sad tale should have ended there, but my daughter, having made it clear she was no longer afraid of me and that she never wished to see me again, uploaded my shameful acts from the cloud to a spicy site. The fallout from my amateur video was quicker than the lawsuit to have it removed for certain. I lost my vet job and had to seek employment in another state, where I could explain away my sudden dismissal. Someday I am sure that I will get over the pain, the hell of feeling like I am being cut to pieces. I'm still reasonably attractive, and even if I don't get over Jack, I could replace him. I'm just not sure what the use would be. I've already had a marriage that I went into not fully loving my spouse, and look at where that got me. I'm not as strong as Jack, for sure. Jack looked me square in the eye and told me to give him my best shot, that he could take it. I couldn't take his, that's for sure. As far as my current love life, I still have random hookups, but I am cold and dead inside emotionally. I still love a monster I created. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm 32 and have been with my wife, Maria, 30, for 8 years and married for 4. We met during our sophomore year of college at a mutual friends party. I was immediately drawn to her confident demeanor and quick wit. Maria was studying business, while I was pursuing engineering, and we quickly bonded over our shared love for outdoor activities and trying new cuisines. Our first date was a disaster. I forgot my wallet and spilled wine on her dress, but Maria laughed it off, and we ended up having a great time walking around campus and talking for hours. From that moment, I knew she was special. As we continued dating, I was impressed by Maria's drive and ambition. She came from a working-class background and was determined to build a successful career. I admired how she balanced her studies with a part-time job and internships. Maria pushed me to step out of my comfort zone, encouraging me to apply for competitive internships and leadership positions in student organizations. After graduation, we both landed great jobs in the city, Maria at a consulting firm and me at an engineering company. We moved in together after a year and got engaged shortly after. Our wedding was small and intimate, with just close friends and family. Maria looked stunning in her simple white dress, and I remember feeling like the luckiest man alive. The first few years of our marriage were incredible. We both advanced in our careers, which allowed us to travel and enjoy life in the city. We had a great group of friends and often hosted dinner parties or game nights at our place. Maria and I communicated well and rarely fought. When we did disagree, we always made an effort to listen to each other and find a compromise. One of the things I loved most about Maria was her independence. We both valued our personal time and hobbies. Maria was into yoga and painting, while I enjoyed playing basketball and working on old cars. We supported each other's interests and maintained a healthy balance between spending time together and pursuing individual passions. Everything changed when my older brother, Alex, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Alex and I had always been incredibly close. He was more than just a brother. He was my best friend, confidant, and role model. Growing up, Alex always looked out for me. He taught me how to ride a bike, helped with my homework, and gave me advice on everything from school to dating. When our parents divorced during my teenage years, Alex became my rock. He was in college at the time, but would call me every day to check in and even came home on weekends to make sure I was okay. Alex was the one who encouraged me to apply to college and helped me move into my dorm. At my wedding, his best man speech brought everyone to tears. Happy tears, of course. Alex's diagnosis hit me like a ton of bricks. He had always been the picture of health, running marathons, eating well, and never smoking. It seemed so unfair. I remember sitting in the doctor's office with him and his wife, Sarah, feeling like the world was falling apart around us. I could barely focus on the words the doctor was saying, my mind reeling with the shock of it all. "Are you okay?" Sarah had asked me, her voice trembling. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. From that moment, I dedicated as much time as I could to Alex. I drove him to chemo appointments, stayed with him in the hospital, and did my best to keep his spirits up. Every time I saw him, he tried to put on a brave face, but I could tell how much the disease was taking out of him. I was determined to be there for him, no matter what. At first, Maria was supportive. She often came with me to visit Alex and helped Sarah with meals and housework. But as the weeks turned into months, things started to shift. One evening, I was sitting at home after spending the day at the hospital with Alex. Maria was pacing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, clearly upset. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my bag and walking toward her. "I feel like I'm losing you," Maria replied, her frustration evident. "You're always with Alex. You're never here, and when you are, you're checked out. I need you too." I felt a pang of guilt. "I'm trying to balance it, Maria. Alex is really sick. I have to be there for him." "I get it, but it's like you're prioritizing him over me." She shot back, her eyes burning with anger. "We don't even have time for us anymore. You're neglecting our relationship." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm not trying to neglect you. I'm just trying to be there for my brother. You know how much this means to me." "I don't know," she muttered, crossing her arms. "You're never here, James. You're always running off to the hospital or the doctor's office. What about me?" "I'm here now," I said, trying to calm the situation. I just need you to understand. Alex needs me. I'm doing the best I can, but it wasn't enough." Over time, the arguments grew more frequent, usually about my schedule or her feeling neglected. One evening, after a long day of sitting with Alex during chemo, I came home to find Maria in tears. She had been quiet all day, and I could tell something was off. "James, I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice breaking. "You're never here for me. You don't even notice how much I need you." "I'm trying, Maria," I said, my frustration rising. "I'm trying to balance everything, but Alex's condition is getting worse. I have to be there for him. Do you understand that?" She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't know how much more I can take. You're so focused on Alex, you've forgotten about me. You're changing, James, and I don't know who you are anymore." I stood there, feeling helpless. "I'm not changing. You're putting him before me," she interrupted, her voice cold. "You don't get it. I'm supposed to be your priority, not him." I had tried to explain how important it was to be there for Alex, but Maria seemed to resent the time I was spending away from her. She couldn't understand why I was so consumed with my brother's fight, and no matter how hard I tried to balance everything, it wasn't enough. The arguments continued. One evening, after yet another fight about my time with Alex, I sat down with her, feeling defeated. "Maria, I know you're upset," I said softly, "but Alex's condition is getting worse. I have to be there for him. I can't just walk away from this." "I know," she said, her voice quieter now. "But I'm scared, James. I feel like I'm losing you." I reached for her hand, my own heart breaking. "You're not losing me, Maria. But Alex, he doesn't have much time left. Please try to understand." But she didn't. And as Alex's health deteriorated, the strain on our relationship only grew. I continued to spend as much time with Alex as I could, feeling guilty for not giving Maria the attention she needed. The situation was exhausting, emotionally, physically, mentally. I loved both of them, but it felt like there was never enough of me to go around. I was torn between my loyalty to Alex and my guilt over neglecting Maria, and it was clear that no matter how much I tried, I couldn't make everything work. Despite aggressive treatment, Alex passed away 8 months after his diagnosis. I was completely devastated. Alex had been such a constant in my life, and the thought of a world without him was unimaginable. The loss hit me hard, and I sank into a deep depression. I took a leave of absence from work and spent most of my time at home. Some days, I could barely get out of bed. Everything reminded me of Alex. TV shows we used to watch together, inside jokes we shared, even certain foods he loved. The grief was overwhelming. Maria tried to be supportive at first, but her patience quickly wore thin. She kept trying to get me to snap out of it and return to our normal life. She would plan outings or invite friends over, but I just couldn't bring myself to socialize. Maria seemed to take my behavior personally, accusing me of pushing her away. This went on for about 3 months. I knew it wasn't easy for her, but I was doing my best to process this immense loss. I was seeing a grief counselor and trying to work through my emotions, but healing takes time. As the weeks passed, Maria became more distant and irritable. Then, one day, I received a call from Tony, Alex's best friend since childhood. Tony had always been like another brother to me, and he had been a great support after Alex's death, but this call was different. His voice was hesitant, almost as if he wasn't sure how to start. "Hey, James," Tony said, his tone cautious. "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I saw something today. Something you might want to know. What's going on?" I asked, a sense of unease creeping in. "I saw Maria," he said, his voice faltering. "She was with another guy." "I'm sorry, man. I didn't want to be the one to call you, but I thought you should know." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean, with another guy?" "She was at a hotel," Tony continued, his words tumbling out quickly. "I took a photo. I didn't want to, but I didn't know what else to do. I thought you should see it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tony. A photo of Maria, her face unmistakable, in the arms of a man I didn't recognize. The picture was blurry, but clear enough to show them in a passionate embrace, the man's face partially obscured as they walked toward the entrance of a hotel. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the screen. The air around me felt thick, as if I couldn't breathe. How could this be happening? How could Maria, after everything, betray me like this? "I'm sorry, James," Tony said quietly through the phone, as if he could sense the shock in my silence. "I really didn't want to hurt you. I need to think," I muttered, barely able to process the information. "I can't talk right now." I hung up, still staring at the photo. It felt like my entire world was crumbling. I had trusted Maria completely. She was the one person I thought I could rely on, especially after losing Alex. How could she do this to me, especially while I was grieving? For hours, I didn't move from my spot, replaying every moment, every conversation, trying to make sense of it. Had I missed the signs? Did I ignore the red flags? When Maria came home later that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the photo lying in front of me, the harsh light from the overhead lamp casting shadows across the room. She walked in, her eyes flicking nervously toward me before she said anything. "James," she asked hesitantly, "what's going on? You're home early." I didn't say anything at first. I just pushed the photo across the table toward her. Her face went pale when she saw it. She took a step back, clearly trying to process what she was looking at. "Maria," I said, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. "What the hell is this?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide, then quickly dropped her gaze. "James, I can explain." "Explain?" I cut her off, my heart pounding in my chest. "How do you explain this? How do you explain being with some guy at a hotel while I'm over there, watching my brother fight for his life?" She swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she spoke. "It's not what you think. Please let me explain." "Explain?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're cheating on me, Maria. After everything. After Alex. How could you do this?" "I wasn't cheating on you," she protested, her words rushing out. It's complicated. It wasn't what it looked like." "Then what was it?" I demanded. "You're in a hotel with some guy, about to go into a room with him. What the hell am I supposed to think?" I wasn't myself, okay," she said, her voice breaking. "I was struggling. You were so consumed with Alex, and I felt so alone. I didn't know how to handle everything, James. I was lost. I felt like I was suffocating. So, you thought that was the answer? You thought cheating was how you deal with things? You couldn't have come to me? You couldn't have talked to me?" "I didn't know how to," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to reach you. You were always with Alex, and I needed someone. I never meant to hurt you." I couldn't process her words. The hurt was too much. "You could have told me you were struggling. I was there for you when Alex was sick, Maria. I was there for you when I should have been grieving myself. And this is what you do." "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt you." But her apology felt hollow. It didn't change what she'd done. The betrayal was too deep. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this," I said, my voice raw. "I can't trust you anymore." She stood there, shaking her head, as if she wanted to say something more, but I couldn't listen. The damage was done. All I could feel was the overwhelming weight of the pain and betrayal. Maria finally spoke, her voice trembling. "James, please. It's not what it looks like. I swear. You have to believe me." I shook my head, the anger bubbling up inside me. Not what it looks like. Maria, you're in a hotel with another man, about to go into a room with him. What do you expect me to think? She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt like I was seeing her as a stranger. She finally broke down, her shoulders shaking. Okay, fine. It's true, she sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. I've been seeing someone for the last 2 months. I didn't know how to tell you. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. 2 months. I choked out, my voice barely recognizable. While I was taking care of Alex, while I was grieving my brother, you were with someone else. I'm sorry, James. I really am, she said, wiping her eyes. I know it was wrong, but you don't understand. I felt so alone. You were always with him, and I needed you here with me. I needed someone to listen to me, to be there for me. So, you decided to cheat? I spat, the words bitter in my mouth. You think that's how you handle feeling lonely? By betraying me? She flinched at my tone, but she didn't stop. I never wanted to hurt you, James, but you weren't there. You were so focused on Alex and I just couldn't deal with it. I felt like I was invisible. I was shaking now, barely able to keep myself together. So, you thought the answer was to sleep with someone else? You think that's fair to me? That's what you do when your partner is struggling. I didn't know what else to do, she cried. You weren't here for me, James. You were so caught up in your brother's illness, and I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I needed someone to care about me. I deserved that too. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. You think you deserve to cheat on me? You think you deserve that more than I deserved your loyalty, your trust? After everything we've been through, you couldn't come to me? You couldn't tell me you were struggling? I know I should have, she whispered, looking down at the floor. But I felt like you weren't listening to me. I felt like I didn't matter. You could have told me. I shouted, my voice rising in frustration. I was here. I was with you. You didn't have to do this. I'm sorry, James, she said, tears flowing freely down her face. I really am. I never meant for it to go this far. It was a mistake, I swear. Please, just let me make it right. I shook my head, the pain threatening to swallow me whole. I don't think you understand, Maria. It's not just about the affair. It's about the betrayal. It's about how you made me feel, like I wasn't enough for you. Like my grief didn't matter. She stepped toward me, her hands outstretched. James, please. I love you. I didn't want this to happen. I still want us to be together. Please don't give up on us. I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my composure. No, Maria. I can't do this. I can't live with someone who would do this to me. You destroyed my trust. I can't even look at you the same way. James, please, she begged, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. We can fix this. We can work through it, I swear. I still love you. You mean everything to me. I felt like I was suffocating. No, you don't. You love yourself. You love the idea of being happy, of being fulfilled, but you don't love me. Not the way I loved you. Not the way I needed you to. Her face crumpled as she took a step back. I'm sorry, she whispered again, her voice small and defeated. Please don't leave me. I'm done, I said, my voice steady despite the pain that twisted inside me. I want a divorce, Maria. This is over. Her face went pale, and she reached out, almost pleading. James, no. Don't leave me. I was wrong, please don't go. I turned away from her, feeling numb. I can't forgive you for this. Not after everything. It's over. She sank to the couch, her sobs echoing in the silence that followed. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't stay. The hurt was too much, and I knew deep down that we couldn't come back from this. The next day, Maria bombarded me with calls and texts, desperately trying to explain herself. I stared at my phone, feeling the weight of it all. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses, but I couldn't ignore it. I picked up the phone when I saw her name. James, please. You have to listen to me. Maria's voice was frantic. I know I hurt you, but you're making a huge mistake. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Maria, what else is there to say? You cheated on me. You betrayed me while I was dealing with Alex's illness. I don't know how you can even try to justify that. James, I'm not justifying it. I'm trying to explain, she said, her voice trembling. You weren't there for me. I needed you, and you were always with Alex. You were emotionally absent, and I felt completely alone. I didn't know how else to cope. Emotionally absent? I repeated, incredulously. Are you serious? I was at the hospital with Alex. I was trying to be there for him while he was fighting for his life. I was grieving, Maria. I was in a hell of my own. And you? I cut myself off, shaking my head. You decided to cheat instead of talking to me about how you were feeling. You didn't come to me for help. You went behind my back. I tried to talk to you, she countered, her voice rising. But you were so caught up in Alex. Every time I tried to say something, you just shut down. I felt like I was invisible. I didn't know what to do anymore. I was shaking with anger now. So, you thought the solution was to sleep with someone else? To throw our entire relationship away? I didn't know what else to do, she cried. I felt like you didn't care about me anymore. I needed affection. I needed attention. I didn't want to be alone. And you weren't there for me. I stared at the phone, my grip tightening. So, you're saying this is my fault? You're blaming me for your decision to cheat? No, I'm not saying it's all your fault, she replied, her voice quieter now, though there was still an edge to it. But I need you to understand how I felt. I felt neglected. I was lonely, James. I felt like I was losing you, and I was scared. That's why I made the choice I did. Lonely? I repeated, incredulously. I was fighting for my brother's life, Maria. I was there for him, and you? I stopped again, realizing the absurdity of the conversation. You don't get to turn this around on me. You don't get to make this my fault. I'm not turning it around, James, she said, sounding exasperated. I'm just trying to make you see where I was coming from. You shut me out when I needed you the most. No, I snapped, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. You shut me out by betraying me. You made a choice. And now you're trying to turn this into my fault? I'm not the one who made that decision, Maria. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost pleading. I'm sorry, James. I know I made a huge mistake. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. But I need you to understand. I was hurting too, and I didn't know how to handle it. I exhaled sharply, fighting back the tears. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, Maria. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. James, please, she whispered. Don't give up on us. We can fix this. We can work through it. I shook my head, my voice breaking. I can't. I'm done. You've destroyed everything we had. I can't keep fighting for someone who wasn't willing to fight for me. I'm sorry, she repeated, her voice full of regret. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, I said, barely able to get the words out. But that doesn't change anything. Goodbye, Maria. I hung up the phone, leaving her voice echoing in the silence that followed. I stared at the screen, still in disbelief. How had I gotten here? How had things unraveled so quickly? Later that night, her texts continued to flood in, each one more desperate than the last. James, I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. You're my everything. I sat on the couch, staring at the messages, feeling the weight of each word. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't let her manipulate me into believing that I was somehow at fault. I couldn't let her turn this around and make me question my own feelings. I wasn't crazy for refusing to reconcile. I wasn't the one who had destroyed everything. I deleted her texts, one by one, and sat in silence, wondering how I would move on from this. It felt like I had lost everything, but I knew, deep down, that I had to let her go. I'm questioning everything now. Part of me is angry at myself for not seeing this coming. Maybe if I had tried harder to balance my time between Alex and Maria, this wouldn't have happened. But then I remind myself that a loving partner would have understood and supported me during such a difficult time. I haven't told many people about Maria's affair yet. I feel embarrassed and don't want to deal with everyone's reactions, but I know I'll need support, especially if I go through with the divorce. The idea of navigating a divorce while still grieving Alex is overwhelming, but I also can't imagine staying with someone who could betray me like this. Any advice would be appreciated. Thank you all for the supportive comments and advice. To clarify a few things, Maria knew how close Alex and I were. She had met him many times and seemed to like him. She was with me at the hospital when he passed away. I never completely shut Maria out during my grieving. We still lived together, had meals together, etc. I just wasn't in the mood for going out or being intimate. Before confronting Maria, I did some digging and discovered that the affair had actually been going on for 4 months, not 2, as she claimed. It started shortly after Alex died. Maria and I didn't have any major relationship issues before this, just normal disagreements, nothing serious. She never expressed feeling neglected until after Alex got sick. I filed for divorce shortly after discovering Maria's affair. The decision wasn't easy, but I knew I could never trust her again after what she did. Maria's reaction to the divorce filing was a mix of anger and desperate pleading. She continued to call and message me constantly, alternating between tearful apologies and accusatory rants. One day, Maria showed up at my office unannounced. She caused a scene in the lobby, crying and begging me to give her another chance. My coworkers were uncomfortable, and I was mortified. I had to have security escort her out. After that incident, I blocked her number for my own sanity. Maria moved out of our house and is now living with her parents. I've stayed in the house, but it feels empty and filled with painful memories. I'm thinking about selling it and finding a new place, but the thought of going through another big life change right now feels overwhelming. Through mutual friends, I heard that Maria has been telling everyone that I emotionally abused her by abandoning her. She claimed I refused to communicate or work on our marriage, leaving her with no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. Hearing these lies spread about me has been infuriating. Some of our friends have taken sides in the divorce. Most have supported me, but a few have believed Maria's version of events. I've lost a couple of friendships over this, which only adds to the hurt. I'm trying to focus on the people who have stood by me. The divorce proceedings have been difficult. Maria is trying to claim half of everything, including my inheritance from Alex. My lawyer assures me she has no legal right to it, but she's dragging out the process anyway. It feels like a slap in the face that she's trying to profit from my brother's death after betraying me. I've been struggling with depression and trust issues since all of this happened. Some days it's hard to even get out of bed, and I've lost weight because I rarely have an appetite. My performance at work has suffered, but thankfully, my boss has been understanding. One positive development is that I reconnected with an old friend from high school, Olivia. We ran into each other at a coffee shop and ended up talking for a while. Olivia lost her mom to cancer a few years ago, so she really understands what I'm going through with Alex. We've been hanging out as friends, and it's been nice to have someone who truly gets it. Olivia and I have a lot in common that I had forgotten about. We were both on the debate team in high school and share a love for classic movies. Olivia has been introducing me to new music and podcasts, which has been a welcome distraction. She doesn't push me to talk about Maria or the divorce, but she's a good listener whenever I need to vent. When Maria found out I was spending time with Olivia, she completely lost it. She showed up at my house unannounced, screaming that I was a hypocrite for moving on so quickly while vilifying her. She even accused me of having an affair with Olivia, which is absolutely not true. I had to threaten to call the police before she would leave. The whole situation has been a nightmare, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on healing and rediscovering who I am outside of my relationship with Maria. I'm grateful for the support of my family and friends during this tough time. I've been trying to honor Alex's memory in positive ways, making a donation to the cancer center where he was treated and volunteering there when I can. Alex's wife, Sarah, and their kids have been a great source of support. We get together for dinner often, and it's comforting to talk about Alex with people who loved him as much as I did. There are still moments when I miss Maria and the life we had together, but then I remind myself of her betrayal and how she's behaved since. That helps reinforce that ending the marriage is the right decision. I'm not ready to think about dating again yet. The idea of putting myself out there and risking more heartbreak is terrifying. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life and healing from everything that's happened. It's been about 6 months since my divorce was finalized last week, and I'm relieved it's finally over. Maria fought me every step of the way, trying to drag out the process and secure more money. In the end, we split our joint assets 50-50, and she didn't get any of my inheritance from Alex. The day after the divorce was official, Maria showed up at my office again, crying and begging me to reconsider, claiming she had made a terrible mistake and still loved me. I calmly but firmly told her it was over and asked her to leave. She refused, causing a scene until security had to escort her out. It was humiliating, and I ended up taking the rest of the day off work. The next day, my boss called me into his office, and I was worried he might be upset about the disruption. However, he was actually very understanding. He shared that he had gone through a messy divorce years ago and offered me some time off if I needed it. I appreciated his support. On a more positive note, things have been going well with Olivia. What started as a friendship has slowly blossomed into something more, and we've been officially dating for about 2 months now. Olivia is kind, understanding, and patient with me as I work through my trust issues. She encourages me to talk about Alex and never makes me feel guilty for still grieving. Olivia and I have been taking things slow, which I really appreciate. We enjoy cooking meals together, going for long walks, and binge-watching TV shows. She's also been helping me rediscover old hobbies I had neglected during my marriage, like playing guitar and photography. I've also been focusing on myself lately. I joined a gym, started learning guitar, and have been traveling more. It feels great to rediscover who I am as an individual. I even took a solo trip to the mountains, something I'd always wanted to do but Maria wasn't interested in. It was refreshing to spend time alone, reflecting and connecting with nature. Maria continues to badmouth me to anyone who will listen. She's told mutual friends that I'm cold and unfeeling, that I never really loved her, and even suggested that Olivia and I must have been having an affair before our divorce. It's frustrating, but I'm doing my best not to get involved in her drama. I've been spending more time with Alex's family. His kids are growing up so quickly, and it's bittersweet to watch them reach milestones that Alex isn't here to see. We've started a tradition of having Sunday dinners together, sharing stories about Alex, and keeping his memory alive. Last month would have been Alex's birthday, and it was a tough day. But Olivia suggested we do something to honor him, so we organized a small charity run in his name, with proceeds going to cancer research. It felt good to channel my grief into something positive. Overall, I'm in a much better place now than I was a year ago. I still miss Alex deeply, but the pain isn't as raw as it once was. I'm cautiously optimistic about my future with Olivia and proud of myself for standing firm and not letting Maria manipulate me into reconciling. There are still tough days, of course. Sometimes I wake up feeling angry at Maria for throwing away our marriage, and other times I miss the future we had planned together. But I'm learning to sit with those feelings without letting them take over. It's been about a year since my divorce, and life has settled into a new normal. I wanted to share some final thoughts on everything. Olivia and I are still together and going strong. We recently moved in together and adopted a dog. She's been an incredible source of support throughout all of this. I still have moments of insecurity or doubt, but Olivia is always patient and reassuring. Our relationship isn't perfect. We've had our share of disagreements and challenges, but we always make an effort to communicate openly and work through things together. It's refreshing to be with someone who values honesty and mutual respect. A few months ago, I ran into Maria at a mutual friend's wedding. It was awkward, but we managed to be civil. She apologized again for her behavior during our divorce and said she was in therapy, working on herself. I wished her well but made it clear that I wasn't interested in rekindling any kind of relationship, even a friendship. Seeing Maria brought up a mix of emotions. Part of me felt angry all over again, remembering her betrayal and the pain she caused, but I also felt a sense of closure. Talking to her made me realize how much I've grown and healed over the past couple of years. The grief over Alex still comes in waves. Some days are harder than others, especially around his birthday and the anniversary of his death. But I found healthier ways to cope and honor his memory. I volunteer at the hospital where he was treated, and I've grown closer to his wife and kids. Alex's oldest son, who is now 14, has been struggling lately. He's been acting out at school and dealing with anger issues. I've been spending more time with him, taking him to basketball games and just being there to talk. It feels good to support him the way Alex always supported me. Olivia and I have talked about our future together. We're not in a rush to get married, but we both see this relationship as long-term. We've even discussed the idea of having kids someday, which is something I never thought I'd want after everything that happened with Maria. It's a bit scary to think about opening my heart again, but Olivia makes me feel safe. Work has been going well. I got a promotion a few months ago, which has been both exciting and challenging. The new role involves more travel, which has been an adjustment for Olivia and me, but we're learning how to balance our time together and our personal pursuits. I've also been reconnecting with old hobbies. I joined a local amateur baseball league, something I loved in college but gave up when life got busy. It's been great to get back on the field and meet new people. Olivia comes to my games when she can, cheering me on from the stands. Looking back, I can see how toxic my relationship with Maria had become. Even before the affair, Maria and I had grown apart, but neither of us was brave enough to admit it. While I'll never excuse her actions, I've made peace with what happened and am focused on moving forward. There are still moments when I wonder about the what-ifs. What if Alex hadn't gotten sick? What if I had noticed Maria pulling away sooner? What if I had handled things differently? But I'm learning to let go of those thoughts and focus on the present. I'm not the same person I was when I wrote that first post 2 years ago. The pain and betrayal changed me, but not all of those changes have been negative. I've learned a lot about myself, about resilience, and about what I really want in a partner and in life. To anyone going through something similar, it does get better. Take the time to heal, surround yourself with supportive people, and don't be afraid to start over. You deserve happiness and someone who truly values you. This will be my final update on this journey. Thank you all once again for the kindness and encouragement over the past couple of years. It made all the difference during my darkest times. I'm looking forward to the future, whatever it may bring. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I've always believed life unfolds like a series of lessons, often in ways you least expect. Growing up in a modest Midwest town, baseball became my sanctuary. From the crack of a bat to the chatter of teammates, it was where I felt alive and capable. I honed my skills through hours of practice with my dad, who cheered for every hit and consoled every strikeout, molding my resilience and determination. As the years went by, my passion for baseball collided with academic ambition. By the time I reached college, I balanced the grueling demands of my engineering courses with the intensity of collegiate sports. I thrived on the challenge, savoring both intellectual growth and the camaraderie of the field. Still, beneath my love for the game, a gnawing realization emerged. Talent only takes you so far without adaptability. When my baseball dreams dimmed, I funneled my energy into a budding career in engineering. I realized that chasing success off the field required as much focus and perseverance as swinging for the fences. That determination paved the way for a career I loved, teaching and mentoring students while tackling real-world problems alongside brilliant minds. I was thriving in a life filled with purpose and connection. Curveballs never came naturally to me, not in baseball and certainly not in life. My collegiate years saw me thriving as a batter who could anticipate and crush fastballs. That skill made me a star on campus, but limited my prospects for professional baseball. I leaned into my education, recognizing its long-term value. Fast forward 25 years past graduation and a decade and a half into my career, I found myself living my dream. I was a full-time professor at a Texas engineering school, actively consulting for government projects and overseeing a prominent manufacturing lab. Life felt like a home run. My wife Tessa and I had settled into our ideal home, and our daughter Tori, a civil engineering junior, was attending the same university where I taught. Everything seemed perfectly aligned. The curveball came suddenly, unexpected and devastating, a call from Tori. "Daddy, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with urgency. "I stopped by the house and saw movers. Mom said she's moving out and that you two are having problems. Why didn't you tell me?" Her words left me stunned. I hesitated before replying. "Are you sure? This isn't some kind of joke?" "No, Daddy," Tori insisted. "I'm standing here watching them pack. Come home. She won't tell me what's going on. Did you do something?" Her question cut deep. I knew I wasn't a perfect husband, but I couldn't think of anything to drive Tessa away. I rushed home, where Tori met me, visibly upset. "She hasn't explained anything," Tori said. "Dad, I'll support you if you didn't do something horrible, did you?" "No, honey, I haven't," I assured her. "Let's go talk to her." Tori, ever the defender of fairness, decided to record the encounter for her sister Talitha. We walked into the house, where Tessa was directing movers. "Tessa, what's going on?" I asked. "I'm leaving, Dax," she said firmly. "I don't want to argue. It won't change anything and will only make me angry." Tori, furious, chimed in. "Mom, unless you explain this, you're only going to make me angrier. What are you doing?" Tessa, clearly uncomfortable, asked Tori to step outside to talk. Tori pulled her hand away, but we followed Tessa onto the deck. She shut the sliding door, paused, and finally said, "I met someone. He's new in town from New Mexico and works in real estate. I'm leaving to be with him. I've already filed for divorce, Dax." "Well, that's a shock," I replied. "You couldn't just cheat, could you? Instead, you had a magical connection and knew immediately he was the one?" Tori snorted. "Sure, Mom, that's how it works. How dumb do you think we are?" Tessa tried to respond, but Tori cut her off. "You're in real estate, Mom. No one tracks your time. How many showings or dinners did you have with Romeo?" "It's not like that," Tessa began. "Yes, it is," I said. "You don't just decide to leave your husband for a soulmate out of nowhere." "You're making it sound cheap," Tessa protested. "It is cheap," Tori snapped. "You're betraying Dad, and that's between you two. But what about me and Talitha? What's your plan for us?" "I love you both," Tessa said quickly. "That hasn't changed. I still love you, Dax, but..." "But nothing," Tori interjected. "You claim to love me, but how do you think I'm supposed to feel about you now, or how Talitha will feel about me?" "I know you're upset," Tessa said, "but you'll see nothing will change. You'll even come to love Charles once you know him." "Not happening," Tori hissed. "I want nothing to do with a guy who goes after a married woman. I'm telling Talitha everything. And you know what's already changed? I've lost all respect for you. Don't bother bringing him near me. I'll spit on him. Tori, Tessa tried, but Tori cut her off again. You don't know anything, Mom. I've never been so disappointed. You've ruined everything. God, I hate you. Tessa turned to me helplessly. Dax, don't look at me, I said. This is on you. Tessa seemed to realize the weight of her actions. She looked between us, but Tori grabbed my arm. Let's go, Dad, she said. I can't stay here with her. Tessa gasped at the insult, but Tori was already dragging me up the steps into her car. She opened the door for me, practically shoving me in. I felt like I was moving in slow motion, blindsided by everything. Tori got in, started the car, and turned to me. Daddy, it's going to be okay, she said. You're reeling, but I'll make it my mission to help you through this and see you happy again. Now buckle up. It's the law. I buckled up, grateful for her support. Tori always drove fast, and with her R8 V10 Plus Spider, her college graduation gift, she added a little extra edge to her usual speed. Jesus, baby, I muttered as she sped down the road. You're going to eliminate me before I have a chance to recover. She laughed, unapologetically. It was only 10 miles to the apartment she shared with Talitha, but we made it in record time. Tori and Talitha were opposites in personality, though almost identical in looks. It amazed me how two kids raised the same way could be so different. Tori was full of energy, always talking and buzzing with excitement. Talitha, in contrast, was quiet and affectionate, except when she played softball. Then she was a powerhouse on the field. When we arrived at their apartment, Talitha squealed, slid onto the couch, and patted the spot next to her. Hey, Daddy, what's up? She asked, wrapping her arms around me. Tori settled in on my other side. Hi, sweetie, I said. It's been a rough day. Her big blue eyes looked up at me. What happened? You won't believe this. Tori jumped in. I went to grab Daddy's jack and found Mom at the house with a moving truck. She said she's leaving him. Talitha froze. What? You're kidding. I pulled her close. I wish I was, baby. What did you do? She asked. My heart sank. Why did both my girls assume I'd done something wrong? Dad didn't do anything, Tori said firmly. It's Mom. She met some guy named Charles and thinks she's in love. Seriously? Talitha asked, shocked. Tori played her the recording, and Talitha burst into tears. Tori and I held her between us, comforting her as she sobbed. Through my own tears, I heard her whisper, What are you going to do, Daddy? I don't know, I said honestly. She's leaving. I can't stop her, and I'm not sure I'd want to at this point. Talitha wiped her eyes. I need to hear it from her, she said. If she says the same thing, I'll be furious and heartbroken. I understand, sweetheart, I said. I'm still in shock, too. Tori, more pragmatic, said, Dad, you need to talk to a lawyer. Talitha frowned. Jesus, Tori, listen to yourself. This is Mom we're talking about. Do you really think she's not capable of worse, considering she's already done this? It's surreal, Talitha murmured. Like the Twilight Zone. It is, Tori agreed. But we have to deal with it. Talitha stood, determined. I'm going to talk to her. Meet me for dinner later. She grabbed her bag and left. Tori leaned into me, and I wrapped an arm around her. We sat in silence for a while before she broke it. Daddy, do you know any lawyers? I blinked, pulled from my thoughts. Yeah, but none for this kind of thing. Call someone you trust and ask for a referral, she urged. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Hours ago, life felt normal. Now I was considering a divorce lawyer. After brainstorming, Tori and I settled on Amanda Sloan, highly recommended by one of my contacts. I scheduled an appointment, received a checklist of documents to bring, and prepared for the next step in this unexpected nightmare. I needed to head home to pack for the next day's reception. Tori offered to drive me and decided to pack for herself and Talitha as well, announcing that they'd be staying with me indefinitely. I protested, but she was firm, and I knew better than to argue. While I focused on gathering financial documents, Tori took it upon herself to help organize our accounts and log into the bank system. Dad, you're not going to believe this, she said, her tone laced with disbelief. What is it? I asked, pausing to look at her. You've got $50 in checking, she replied, and $1,000 in a money market account. Is that just the minimum to avoid fees? Yes, but we should have much more than that, I replied, stunned. Mom must have drained it, she said. This isn't just cold, it's probably illegal. I'll move some funds around, I said. I got money in a credit union she can't touch. That evening, we met Talitha for dinner. She was visibly shaken. I had to hear it from her myself, she said, wiping away tears. I'm sorry I doubted you, but some things you need to hear firsthand. You're not mad at me, are you? I asked. No, Dad, I understand, she said. Tori hugged her. I wouldn't have believed it either if I wasn't there. Talitha shared what she learned. Mom wants us to meet Charles. She thinks we'll love him. I told her I wouldn't meet him. And honestly, I don't even want to see her. She lied to us. She cheated. Hearing that confirmed my worst fears. I guess we know the truth now, I said. I don't want anything to do with her either. But my emotions were in chaos. Grief, sadness, and above all, anger. The next day, Tori and Talitha drove me to meet Amanda Sloan, a no-nonsense lawyer who wasted no time. Within 2 days, she filed divorce papers, froze our finances, and demanded Tessa return any withdrawn funds. Neither of us could touch the accounts except for daily expenses. Soon after, Tessa called. Why are you being so difficult, Dax? She asked. Difficult? I echoed. You're the one who left. She insisted on talking in person. When she arrived and saw the girls, she asked, Why are you here? We live here, Talitha said bluntly. Tori added, We're not leaving Dad alone. Then they grabbed their bags and left without acknowledging her further. Tessa sat across from me and sighed. I don't want this to be harder than it has to be. I still love you, but I need to be with Charles. We can still be friends for the girls' sake. Friends? I said. I don't have friends who treat me like this, or enemies for that matter. Why did you freeze the accounts? She asked. You drained them, I replied. You have a job, Tessa. You earn good money. But you have accounts at the credit union, she said. Which you've never contributed to, I reminded her. When we were together, it was ours. Now it's mine. Let the courts decide. By the way, wasn't Charles a roller skating enthusiast? She wrinkled her nose. His name is Charles. Stop being childish. I don't care what you think, I shot back. Is there anything else? The girls, she said. They're furious. You must have said something to them. Me? I asked incredulously. They don't need me to tell them anything. They can see for themselves what you've done. How long has this been going on? Why didn't you ever tell me you were unhappy? We could have tried to fix it. Tessa looked wistful. I wasn't unhappy, she said. Have you ever met someone and felt an instant connection? Like magnets? Yes, I replied. When I met you. She avoided my gaze. Can't we move on? We don't have to be angry. We've loved each other too long to let it go like this. We can still be friends. I don't want to be your friend, Tessa, I said. After the divorce, I doubt we'll have a reason to talk. The girls will bring us together. Graduations, weddings, their lives go on, she countered. Maybe, I said. I'll handle what I need to. I'm still the same person, she added. You used to like me. No, I didn't. Or if I did, I never really knew you. I'm done. You can leave, I said firmly. Tessa sighed and left. Needing space, I drove to the river, parked, and stood by the water to clear my head. After a while, a voice interrupted my thoughts. Hi, Daddy, Talitha said, walking up to me. Hi, doll. How'd you find me? The family tracker, she said, grinning. You insisted we keep it. I laughed, and she leaned into me. It's beautiful here, she said. What did Mom want? I sighed. She wanted to know why I froze the accounts and said we should be friends. She claims we'll need to stay connected for you and Tori. Talitha was quiet for a moment. Tori and I already talked. We won't invite her to anything. We miss her, but we can't go through this with her. You're sure? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, let's grab dinner. How about Mexican food? We called Tori, but she was busy, so it was just me and Talitha. Over time, things settled. The divorce was finalized after several meetings, and the girls stayed with me for 2 weeks. Eventually, I insisted they move back to their apartment. I love having you here, I told them. But you need to get back to your lives. I'll always be here for you. Okay, Daddy, Talitha said. We don't want you to feel lonely. Then call, visit, or invite me out. Do what you've always done. After hugs and sniffles, they agreed. They checked in often, and when the divorce was final, they stayed with me for another week. They didn't mention their mom, and I didn't ask. I poured myself into work, taking on more projects and classes to stay busy. I missed being married, the comfort of a partner, the small acts of care, but slowly I healed. It took a year to feel better, then 2. By then, Tori was finishing her PhD, and Talitha had paused her studies to work at a mortgage company. Both were thriving, and I was proud of them. Life moved forward, as it always does. Tessa occasionally disrupted our lives, like at Talitha's graduation, where she overheard plans to celebrate and insisted on joining us. "Mom, shouldn't you hurry back to Chucky Boy?" Tori asked. Her face darkened. "Charles and I broke up," she said. "Oh, really? When?" Talitha asked. "If you'd talked to me, you'd know. It's been 18 months, Tessa replied. "Well, we've been busy," Tori said dryly. I couldn't help but laugh, earning a glare from Tessa. We all drove separately to the barbecue restaurant. We managed to find her a seat, though the girls made it clear they didn't want her there. She left shortly after dinner, and I left for Tarawa the next day to work on a resort project as a consultant and shareholder. Tarawa was stunning. Pristine beaches and vibrant oceans. I spent time at clubs, met new people, danced, and even had a couple of flings. It was refreshing, and I returned ready to start living again. The idea of revisiting California and my old neighborhood crossed my mind. I decided to take the motor home, towing a Wrangler for local trips. After stocking up, I hit the road. Traveling was a blast. I stayed at campgrounds, attended events, and met many people, mostly couples, which made being single feel a bit lonely. It took 3 weeks to reach my destination due to frequent stops. Once there, I explored Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Ojai for a few days. One afternoon, I was at a coffee shop in Ojai when a commotion caught my attention. A woman, clearly a Karen, was causing trouble over a mask policy. Annoyed, I focused on the people waiting outside. One woman gave up, sat at a nearby table, and pulled out her phone. She looked oddly familiar. When she went inside, it hit me. Her walk sparked a memory. "Jacinta de Leon," I murmured. How could I forget? Jacinta had moved to my town in 3rd grade. She was magnetic, huge, dark brown eyes and a radiant smile. She quickly became my best friend. We walked home together every day, coordinated class schedules, and spent nearly all our time together. By junior high, I was completely in love with her. Unfortunately, my feelings weren't mutual. To her, I was just her best friend. I stayed silent, afraid of ruining what we had. I gritted my teeth through her string of boyfriends, enduring the heartache while cherishing the moments we spent together, like when she always saved a couple of dances for me at school events. One day, while playing cribbage in my room, Jacinta asked, "Dax, why don't you have a girlfriend?" I stammered, unable to admit the truth, that the girl I wanted didn't see me that way. "I'll help you," she declared cryptically. Soon, a parade of her beautiful friends started showing up, her idea of matchmaking. We remained close until she moved to Los Angeles and I to Texas. Years later, she reappeared, even more stunning than before. Now, an elegant woman with an air of independence. She wore a beige silk dress and black low-heeled shoes that highlighted her legs. Sitting in a coffee shop, flipping through her phone, she suddenly looked up, her eyes lighting up as she recognized me.
"Dax, oh my God, is it really you?"
She squealed, rushing over and nearly knocking me over in a hug, just like when we were kids.
"It's been ages,"
she said excitedly.
"What are you doing here? Are you alone? Is your family with you?"
I carefully disentangled myself, wary of the hot coffee she held. "Take a seat before you scald me," I said, laughing. She sat down, pulling me into another hug. It felt like we were kids again, sitting side by side on the cafeteria bench. "Why are you here?" she asked. "How long are you staying?" "I'm touring the country in my van, revisiting the old neighborhood," I explained. "I've been here a few days with no real plans." She nodded. "I moved here 3 years ago, opened a real estate office, and business is booming. What are you doing tonight? We need to catch up." Her enthusiasm was contagious. "No plans," I said. "I decide what to do each day as it comes." "Wait," she said, suddenly serious. "Aren't you married? Where's your wife?" "I'm divorced," I admitted. "It's a long story." She brushed it off. "I don't have time for that. You're taking me to dinner tonight. I have a fashion show in 20 minutes. Give me your number." I handed it over, and she immediately texted me. "Wear a collared shirt," she teased, as she rushed off, leaving me grinning. Later, I remembered her love for turquoise and bought her a handmade silver bracelet and matching anklet from a jewelry shop. I dressed in black slacks and a pink button-down shirt, sprayed on cologne, and drove to the address she sent me. Her house left me speechless. It was a stunning historic property in Ojai, complete with gardens, wrought iron fencing, and a guest house. The grand stucco home was worth millions. I couldn't help but feel a little intimidated. I parked on the street, honked at the gate, and walked in. The property was stunning. Fountains, colorful flowers, a koi pond, and mature avocado trees everywhere. In front of the garage sat a green late-60s Jaguar E-Type. The place was breathtaking, a clear testament to Jacinta's success. When I rang the doorbell, the deep, resonant chime matched the house's elegance. Jacinta opened the door and I froze. She giggled at my expression. "Cat got your tongue?" she teased. "You know how you look, Jacinta. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," I said. She hugged me tightly. "God, I've missed you, Dax." "I brought you something," I said, handing her a gift. She opened it and squealed with delight, pulling out the turquoise jewelry. "You remembered," she said, beaming. We headed toward the gate, her hand in mine. "Are you sure you want to take the Jeep?" I asked. She laughed. "What, you think I'm too fancy for a Jeep? I'm still me, Dax." I chuckled. "You're just looking a little too glamorous for it. And judging by this place, you're doing really well." She grinned. "I've worked hard. Right now, I'm wrapping up a big real estate deal at Lake Casitas. Property here is insane." As we drove, she shared snippets of her journey, starting in West Covina, working for a big agency, then founding her own. "Enough about me. Tell me about you," she said. I handed her my iPad to scroll through pictures of my daughters. "Your girls are gorgeous," she said. "Is this your wife?" "Ex-wife," I clarified. "We divorced 3 years ago." "I'm sorry, is it still a sore subject?" I shrugged. "Not anymore." "What about you? I don't see a ring." She shook her head. "No marriage for me. I had a long relationship, but it ended 4 years ago. I don't like talking about it much." We chatted about our lives. I mentioned how close I was with my daughters and that they might join me later on my trip. Jacinta smiled warmly. "That's so sweet." "And you? Any kids?" I asked. "No, just me," she said. "I always thought I'd be a terrible mom. My mother was incredible, and I'd never measure up." Her honesty made her all the more endearing. We arrived at the restaurant, and Jacinta held my hand as we walked inside. Once the food arrived, she started talking, just like when we were kids. "The guy I was with was another real estate agent," she said. "We talked about him moving in, but things never worked out." Her expression turned serious. "That's the part I don't like to talk about." I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to, Jacinta." "No, I do," she insisted. "He was working with me on a big deal and cheated me. He bought land without doing his homework, and it backfired. Right in the middle of the property was 200 acres owned by the city. It was gifted with restrictions, no development for 50 years. "What happened?" I asked. She sighed, recalling the story. "He tried to get me to buy into it, claiming he could fix it. He couldn't. He resorted to shady deals and bribery, got caught, and ended up in jail. Luckily, I sensed something was off and I didn't get involved." "So you left?" I asked, leaning in. "Yeah," she said with a nod. "After Bob went to prison, I sold my agency and moved back home. Best decision of my life, and then I ran into you." "I was just as surprised to see you," I said, smiling. Her expression brightened. "Are you excited?" "Of course," I replied. "I didn't expect to find you here. I was just revisiting old places, planning to head to the coast." "How long are you staying?" she asked. "I've got nowhere to be until fall semester," I said. "Even then, my classes are online. My only real work commitment is in December." Her face lit up. "If I clear my schedule, can I join you for a walk? That is, if you don't have other plans." "I do," I said. Her face fell. "And they'll all be better with you." Her eyes sparkled. "Really? Then let's do everything on your list." Her enthusiasm made me laugh. "You haven't changed, Jacinta." She grinned mischievously. "Oh, I've changed. I'm smarter, and I keep finding hair in weird places," she whispered with a smirk. I burst out laughing, and soon we had the entire restaurant's attention with our antics. Spending time with Jacinta was pure joy. She was smart, funny, and full of life. As I walked her to the door, she chatted nonstop, making plans for our next outing. At the door, she hugged me tightly before leaving. The following 2 weeks were incredible, filled with laughter and excitement I hadn't felt in years. Jacinta was like a breath of fresh air, making life feel vibrant and new, much like when we were kids. It made me realize how stagnant things had been with Tessa, where routine had taken over. I started noticing the way Jacinta looked at me, her warm brown eyes with flecks of gold and green glowing in the sunlight. She hadn't mentioned my 2-week timeline, and neither had I. 3 weeks had passed, and I had no intention of leaving. We spent nearly every day together, always planning when we'd see each other next before parting ways. After nearly 2 months together, Jacinta invited me in after a day of antique shopping. We were snuggled on her couch sipping whiskey with an old kung fu show playing in the background. Suddenly, I noticed she had gone quiet. Turning to her, I saw her looking at me, her eyes soft and liquid. "Is something wrong, Peaches?" I asked. "No. Yes. Maybe," she replied hesitantly. I chuckled. "That clears things up." "Dax," she began, "why are you still here? Are you just spending time with an old friend, or is this something more?" I hesitated. "It started as friendship, but what do you think it is?" "It's more than friends for me," she admitted. "I loved you back then, and I think I still do. Why didn't you ever ask me out?" "You were my best friend," I said. "I was terrified it would ruin everything if you didn't feel the same." "I wanted you to," she whispered. "I tried so hard to get your attention, but was too scared to ask you myself." "You were the girl of my dreams," I admitted. "I just didn't know you felt the same." "Do you still dream about it?" she asked softly. "If you don't plan to stay," she continued, "you should go now. I can't fall for you again if you're going to leave." "I'm not leaving," I assured her. "I have responsibilities, my girls, and work, but I can stay." She smiled. "We'll figure it out, but right now, I want something else." She led me to the bedroom, and the night felt like stepping back into my 20s. In the weeks that followed, we spent nearly every moment together. Time slipped by, and suddenly, 4 months had passed. My daughters, Tori and Talitha, began questioning how long I planned to stay in California. I wanted to tell them about Jacinta in person, but plans changed when I got a text from Talitha. "Dad, I'm visiting for a week. Flying into LA Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Can you pick me up?" "Of course, doll, I can't wait," I replied. I told Jacinta. "Talitha is coming to stay for a week." "Uh-oh," she said, cuddling closer. "You need to tell them about us. I'm not hiding for a week. I want to meet them. They look like girls I'd love." "I want you to meet them too," I said. "I plan to talk to them in person, but now I'll suggest a Zoom call so everyone can get to know each other." "Perfect," she said. "When?" "I'll arrange it for Monday night. Do you have plans?" "Nope," she said, smiling. "Let's do it." I managed to get the girls on a Zoom call, though they were suspicious about my motives. After some casual chatting, I finally worked up the courage to speak. "I know I've been mysterious," I began. "I was going to talk to you in person, but I've met someone." Tori smirked. "Dad, we're not dumb. We figured it out." Talitha added, "Yeah, you're not slick." "Who is she?" I grinned. "Girls, I want you to meet her. Be nice, okay?" Jacinta walked in, sat on my lap, and I introduced her. "This is Jacinta de Leon. She was my best friend in high school, and we've reconnected. She's the reason I've been here so long." Tori and Talitha were initially stunned, but quickly warmed up. "God, Dad, she's gorgeous," Tori said. Talitha added, "We're the gatekeepers, Jacinta. You've got to impress us." Jacinta laughed. "I'd expect nothing less. I love your dad, and I hope to be a part of both his and your lives. I'm not here to take him away from you." Tori replied, "We just miss him being in California all the time." Jacinta assured them, "We'll figure it out. I want to meet you both and make this work." The conversation flowed easily, with the girls joking and sharing stories about me. When the call ended, I turned to Jacinta. "So, what do you think?" "They're amazing," she said, smiling. "Smart, funny, and definitely your daughters." When Talitha arrived, I picked her up at the airport. Seeing her took my breath away. My little girl had grown into a beautiful, confident woman. She hugged me tightly and chatted non-stop as we grabbed burgers at In-N-Out. By the time we got to the van, she was still full of energy, excited to see how it converted into a home. She was thrilled with the setup. Later, I told her we were going to Jacinta's for dinner. She lit up, quickly showered and changed, and then declared herself ready. I got cleaned up and we headed off to what I knew would be a memorable evening. Talitha kept commenting on the scenery and neighborhoods as we drove, and the closer we got to Yasina's house, the more impressed she seemed. When we reached the gate, I entered the code. As we pulled into the driveway, Talitha gave me a wide-eyed look. "Daddy, your girlfriend lives here? You've got way more game than I thought." I laughed. "She's a big-time real estate developer. You'd never guess it from high school. She's Hispanic. Her parents came here from Honduras 5 years before she was born. Her dad worked in an almond orchard and eventually owned it, and her mom ran a small tamal farm. Back then, she did everything on her own." "Wow," Talitha said, clearly amazed. We parked and headed inside. Jacinta was in the kitchen, and when she and Talitha saw each other, they froze for a second, then broke into big smiles and rushed to hug. What are you cooking? Talitha asked. It smells incredible, Jacinta smiled. Dinner's going to be spicy. Do you like spicy food? Hell yes, Talitha said. You can call me Tally if you want, Jacinta said. Tori and your dad do. Thanks, but I like Jacinta, Talitha replied. I can switch if you want. Jacinta laughed. I'm fine with Jacinta. Let's talk spice. Jacinta kissed me quickly before leading Talitha to the stove. She opened the oven, releasing a heavenly aroma. These are lamb ribs loaded with spices, she said. We'll shred the meat for tortillas with pico de gallo, brown rice, and refried beans. Dax, can you pick some avocados? There should be plenty on the trees. Oh my God, Talitha said. You just pick avocados? Jacinta chuckled. Yeah, we have lots of trees. I want to go, Talitha said. Need any help, Jacinta? No, just peeling and slicing the avocados later. You go with your dad while I set the table. I grabbed a basket and Talitha and I walked around picking ripe avocados. This place is amazing, she said. And Jacinta's even prettier in person. You're doing great, Dad. I laughed. Thanks, doll. I'm glad you like her. I love her, you know. Yeah, I can tell, she said. She loves you too. You can see it. Dinner was as delicious as it smelled. Sitting at Jacinta's large table with two stunning women was a treat. I offered to do the dishes, and when I finished, Jacinta and Talitha were on the couch with a laptop, whispering. They quickly closed it as I walked in, and Jacinta patted the seat between them. Uh-oh, I said. What are you two plotting? What? Talitha asked, feigning innocence. He's paranoid, Jacinta teased. Old people, right? I smirked. We're the same age. Yeah, but you're the paranoid one, Talitha said. Not true, I said, but I know you've been scheming against me since forever. All for your benefit, she replied. They finalized plans that didn't include me, and after playing a few games, we headed back to the van. Talitha kept glancing at me, her expression unreadable, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. What? I finally asked. I like her, Daddy, she said, a small smile forming. You're lucky. I know, right? I replied, chuckling. Don't let her get away, she added, her tone turning serious. Good thing I'm here to keep you in line. Ha! If anything, you being here might cause trouble, I teased. But I'm glad you're here. I knew you'd like her. She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. How do you think Mom will react? It's not her business, I said firmly. I'm not seeing her or asking her, so I don't care. Talitha tilted her head slightly. I see her sometimes, and so does Tori. What should I tell her if she asks about you? She asks about me? I asked, surprised. Yeah, Talitha admitted. She always does. I had no idea. Are you lying to her? She laughed. No, but I don't say much. Mostly that you're fine. If I have to, I'll just tell her you met someone. Do what feels right, I said with a nod. I trust you. You're smarter than me. Smarter? She giggled, flashing the smile that had melted my heart since she was a baby. We had a great week. Sometimes just me and Talitha, sometimes all three of us, and occasionally Talitha and Jacinta went off on their own. By the time Talitha returned to Austin, she and Jacinta were planning our next get-together. Tori flew in 3 weeks later, and her reaction to Jacinta was just as positive. We were on a roll. I stayed in California until consulting work called. After talking to Tori, Talitha, and Jacinta, we decided to take a working vacation. Jacinta and I flew to Tarawa, and the girls arrived the next evening. I worked during the day while they explored, and we spent the evenings in paradise. By the end, I had 3 tan women and 2 daughters who adored Jacinta. I had to head back to Austin to do some real work in my office, which was going to take about 2 weeks. Jacinta flew in the second weekend. The girls picked her up Friday morning, and she spent the day with them while I finished up. We met for dinner, and she stayed with me. Sunday night, we planned to take the girls for a walk, but their mother chose that day for one of her rare unannounced visits. She knew that giving notice would mean they'd suddenly become busy, so she always tried to surprise them. When Jacinta and I arrived, she was already at their apartment, making things awkward as hell. Tori introduced Jacinta as Daddy's girlfriend, and the shock on Tessa's face was unmistakable. The girls tried to usher her out, saying we had a date, but she wouldn't leave. So, how did you meet Dax? She asked Jacinta. Jacinta smiled. I sat across from him in math class. Tessa looked confused. You're both taking a class? I laughed. No, this was when we were 10 years old. You've known each other since you were 10? Tessa asked, baffled. Why haven't I heard of or met you before? Jacinta explained. We lost touch for a long time and only reconnected this year, Tori cut in before things got worse. Mom, we'd love to chat, but we have plans. Tessa snorted unhappily, but Tori firmly guided her out. The look on her face could have curdled milk. When she was gone, Talitha turned to Jacinta apologetically. I'm so sorry, that was awkward. She showed up 5 minutes before you and didn't want to leave. Jacinta laughed. It's okay. It was bound to happen eventually. I have my place in your lives, and I'm here for you. Over dinner and later at home, the girls and I finally confronted the conversation we'd all been avoiding. Talitha, clearly nominated as the spokesperson, broke the silence. Daddy, what are your immediate and long-term plans? She asked, her tone direct. Plans for what? I replied, trying to deflect. She didn't waver. I mean, do you plan to spend the rest of your life living in a van in California, or is there a bigger picture? I laughed. No, I don't plan to live in a van forever. Jacinta and I haven't discussed the long term yet. Tori chimed in. Mind if we hang around while you two talk about it? I looked at Jacinta. I don't mind, she said. I know how much your father means to you, and I know how much you mean to him. But you should also know that I love him, and I'm not letting him go. Tori nodded. We know, Talitha added. We don't like how far away you live. Dad, I've been talking to people at work, and Jacinta and I have discussed it too. I'm going to get my broker's license, and she and I are starting a real estate business here. I raised an eyebrow at Jacinta. Really? You didn't mention this. She giggled. Yes, Dax, I'm planning to leave my business in Ojai. Talitha and I see a huge market opportunity here, and we've been brainstorming. I'm listening, I said. I want us all together, she said. My idea is this. I want you to live with me in Ojai for 6 months of the year. I'll hire an office manager and we'll spend 3 months here while Talitha runs the business. The other 3 months, I want us to live in Tarawa. I fell in love with the place, and as the resort owner, I can manage that. That's a plan, I said. But what about the interruptions? As expected, things didn't always go perfectly. Business in Austin often pulled us back from Ojai and vice versa. Despite the back and forth, we stuck to our Tarawa schedule, and Tori and Talitha frequently joined us there. One afternoon, about 3 months into our Austin stint, Talitha texted me with a photo. Hey, Dad, the message read. What's up? I replied. Just reviewing bridge inspection schedules. Can we grab lunch at 1? Sure, I answered. Does Ichiyumi sound good? Perfect, she responded. When I arrived at the restaurant, the hostess led me to a booth where Talitha was seated with another young woman. After the waitress took my drink order, Talitha turned to me with a smile. Dad, this is Campbell Martin, she said. My girlfriend. I was stunned, jaw practically on the floor. Campbell didn't take it well. Screw this, she said. Let me out of here. I don't need this. Wait, Campbell, please, Talitha pleaded. I didn't mean for this to go sideways. I snapped out of it. Campbell, I'm sorry. My reaction wasn't about you. Talitha never told me she was gay. You surprised me, that's all. It's my fault, Talitha admitted. I should have prepared you. Campbell relaxed a bit. She's my first girlfriend. I didn't think it needed explaining. I turned to Talitha. Did you think I'd love you less? You've always had my heart, you know that. Her smile returned, and with it, the warmth that had defined our bond from the start. She started crying just as the food arrived, then jumped up and rushed to the restroom. Campbell turned to me, her eyes narrowed. Damn, man, why'd you say that? Campbell, I don't know you, I said. If you're Talitha's girlfriend, I'll get to know you. But you don't know me either, so stop feuding and swearing at me. It doesn't help. Honestly, though, don't you think being a lesbian is something you'd tell your parents? She shook her head. I wouldn't know. I don't have parents, but you don't get it either. It's not easy. Let me ask you, if you have a secret, love someone deeply, and don't want to disappoint them or hurt them, would you risk sharing it and getting hurt? I sighed. I don't know. I don't know what I said or did to make Tally feel like she couldn't trust me. Maybe I wasn't as present as I should have been. Talitha came back with her makeup freshly applied, masking her tears. I grabbed her hand and pulled her close. I love you with all my heart, I told her. You're my doll, and nothing will ever change that. Now go sit by your girlfriend. She sat next to Campbell, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, Daddy, I just... Shh, I interrupted. It's over. We won't talk about it again. Now, tell me how you met Campbell. She smiled. She was a pitcher on the Florida State team. We met at a tournament. Love at first sight? I asked. Campbell laughed. It was for me. But she had a boyfriend, so we stayed friends. And then? I asked. Until I moved here for a job, she said. What do you do? I asked. If you're okay with it, she replied. I don't mind, she said. I'm a software developer. She looked at Talitha, then back at me, rolling her eyes. He's testing me, huh? Will I pass? I laughed. You're a beautiful woman, Campbell. You don't need my approval, but I see what you're doing. Campbell raised an eyebrow. If I were your father, you'd fail the test. You're gorgeous, but you're too exposed. What the hell? Lucky you're not my father. Campbell, you're the one who asked him, Talitha said with a giggle. I like the way she looks, Daddy. I raised my hands in surrender. That's all that matters. Despite the rocky start, the conversation ended on a good note, and we parted amicably. The next evening, Tori stopped by and dropped a bombshell. Daddy, I hear you met Campbell, she said, giving me a knowing look. Tori, did you know about her? Did you know Talitha is bi? I asked, still processing. She sighed, clearly expecting the question. Yes, Daddy, I've always known. And before you get any ideas, if you ever keep a secret from me, I won't snitch on you either. Deal? Fair enough, I said. How well do you know Campbell? Pretty well, Tori replied. Tally told me a lot back in college, but I'll be honest, she wasn't always great. What do you mean? I asked, curious. She had a steady girlfriend once and cheated on her, Tori explained. Tally wasn't happy about it, so they stopped hanging out for a while. Wow, I didn't know that, I said, surprised. She's an adult now, Dad, Tori said with a shrug. Let her live her life. I get that, but if you were dating someone like that, a sudden thought struck me. Tori, she laughed. No, Dad, if I'm finding a life partner, it'll be a guy. After Tori left, Jacinta came home, and I decided to tell her about meeting Campbell. Her reaction caught me off guard. Oh no, I said, don't tell me you knew too. She hesitated before replying. Yes, Dax, Talitha told me she planned to talk to you. Why am I always the last to know important things about my daughter? I asked, frustrated. Jacinta laughed lightly. Because you're a man, Dax. Girls talk to women more easily. Well, I don't like it, I grumbled. Did you know Campbell cheated on an old girlfriend? Tori told me. And does that bother you? She asked. She was young, but yes, it does, I admitted. Jacinta frowned, her tone turning serious. Dax, they were 19 or 20. Didn't you make mistakes at that age? Yes, but not cheating, I replied firmly. The tension from the conversation lingered for a few days until I finally confronted Talitha. I'm worried about you, I told her, especially about Campbell. You know how awful it was when your mom cheated? Talitha's expression hardened. Yeah, I know. I'm the one who told you, remember? And now you think Campbell's the same? That pisses me off. She stormed out, ignoring my calls and texts afterward. Jacinta wasn't happy either. When she got home that evening, she demanded, What did you say to Talitha? Did she tell you? I asked. Yes, Jacinta replied sharply. She came to the office crying. Why did you say that? Because I'm worried about her, I said defensively. Jacinta's frustration was palpable. You're projecting, Dax. Campbell's a sweet girl who's grown up. Stop interfering. I just want to protect my daughter, I said quietly. Then let her live her life, she snapped. Your worry feels more like control. For the first time since we'd been together, my voice rose in anger. You're meddling, and she's not even your daughter. Jacinta looked at me like I'd slapped her. You're an idiot, she said quietly. How could you say that to me? She is my daughter. Ask her. I know you've been hurt, Dax, but taking it out on me or Talitha with a comment like that is just petty and mean. She turned and walked away, her back rigid with anger. Moments later, I heard her footsteps in the bedroom. I sat there fuming for another half hour before she came out, this time with suitcases. What are you doing? I asked. I'm going back to Ojai, she said. When you pull your head out of your A, call me. Her eyes brimmed with tears, her voice trembling. I'm not staying here with you like this. She walked out, leaving me stunned. How had it escalated to this? Why couldn't she understand my perspective? Why couldn't Talitha? I spent the rest of the day sulking and barely slept that night, haunted by the memory of Jacinta's wounded expression. The next morning, I stumbled through a mental fog, managing to pour myself nothing more than a bowl of cereal. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood Campbell, the last person I wanted to see. I sighed and stepped aside to let her in. Without hesitation, she strode past me into the hallway, exuding confidence. We need to talk, she said firmly. But first, I want coffee. Strong, black. I just stood there, momentarily dumbfounded by her boldness. Dax, she pressed, crossing her arms. Either you make me coffee or we're done talking. I'm furious with you, but I also understand you. So what's it going to be? Coffee, or are you throwing in the towel? I couldn't help but laugh despite myself. Feisty, bold, and stunning in her ripped jeans and crop top, she was impossible to ignore. All right, I said, heading to the kitchen. Coffee it is, just don't kick my A, Campbell. She grinned. I could, I'm a damn good kickboxer. Somehow I'm not surprised, I said. I've got some Blue Mountain beans. Want to try them? Sure, she said, leaning casually against the counter. By the way, I've always dreamed of owning my own coffee shop someday. Not one of those chains, though. As I ground the beans and set up the espresso machine, she sat at the bar, chatting about her vision for her shop. I handed her a cup of freshly brewed coffee, and she took a sip, nodding approvingly. This is amazing, she said, setting the cup down and resting her face in her hands, her dark eyes locked onto mine. Dax, you're crazy, I chuckled. Probably, but what makes you say that this time? Talitha's devastated, she said, and honestly, so am I. She doesn't understand you, but I do. I frowned. You do? Enlighten me. I understand, she said. Your wife, Talitha's mom, cheated on you. Talitha told you that? I asked. She did, Campbell said. And she also told me how devastated both of you were. So what are you getting at, Campbell? I asked, leaning back slightly. You see Talitha with me and you're afraid, she said, meeting my gaze directly. Tori's probably told you about my past, about what I did. You think I'll cheat on her, don't you? You think I'll break her heart, just like your wife broke yours. I sighed, unable to deny the accusation. And what do you plan to do about it? I'm going to show you who I really am, she said, her tone steady. You're going to get to know me, and I'll let you see what it's like to be me. Fair enough, I replied. You're off to a good start. She smiled, her dazzling white teeth contrasting with her golden skin. Dax, I know what I look like. I've been hit on by men and women alike since I was young. Not surprising, I said. You're beautiful, Campbell. Thank you, she said softly, her expression briefly vulnerable. Talitha probably hasn't told you much about women's college sports, has she? In softball, most players are lesbians. I'd say maybe 10 of my teammates weren't. I raised an eyebrow. That's quite the minority. It is, she agreed. Now imagine being young and surrounded by that environment. I was a sophomore when I started dating another girl. We were together for a year. I didn't cheat on her, and as far as I know, she didn't cheat on me. What happened? I asked. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I was invited to an elite skills camp run by two legendary players I idolized. It was a huge opportunity, so of course I went. And then? I prompted. Well, she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and regret. These legends weren't just interested in me as a player. They started taking me to fancy dinners, clubs, concerts, experiences I'd never had before. They pushed me to the edge. I frowned. You're saying they crossed the line? Campbell nodded. That's where you'll have to use your imagination, Dax. These women were everything I'd ever admired, and they took advantage of that. I was silent, trying to process her story, the layers of complexity in her life that I hadn't considered. She seemed to sense my struggle and sipped her coffee, waiting for me to respond. Tears shimmered in her deep brown eyes before slipping down her cheeks. Watching her pain was breaking my heart, and I finally understood how hard it was for her to share this with me. She was doing it because she loved Talitha and knew how much my daughter meant to me. In her vulnerability, she was reaching out, needing me to trust her. I realized I had to stop this hurt. I was the one causing it. Grabbing some tissues from the counter, I walked around, handed them to her, and gently pulled her to her feet before wrapping her in a hug. At first, she was stiff and resistant, but I held her close and spoke softly. Campbell, I'm so sorry. You don't need to say any more. I understand, okay? I know how hard this was for you, and I made it necessary. Please forgive me. Slowly, she melted into my arms, pressing against me as sobs shook her body. I whispered reassurances, promising that everything would be okay, that I would fix things, and apologizing for not giving her a chance. After a while, her tears subsided, and I carried her to the couch in the living room. She curled up beside me, and we spent hours talking. As dinner time approached, I cooked for her, and she helped by staying close, leaning into me as if we'd known each other forever. Despite the differences between her and my daughters, it felt like I had another daughter in the room. We drank 2 bottles of wine, and by the end of the night, she was a happy, giggling drunk. She stayed over, sleeping in Talitha's room, and the next morning she called Talitha and invited her over for breakfast. When Talitha walked in, Campbell and I were side by side at the stove, chatting easily as we made pancakes. Campbell had one arm draped around me, and Talitha marched right over, stepping between us. "What are you doing here, Campbell?" she asked. "What, like Dad, I came to enlighten your poor, clueless father," I said with a grin. Talitha shot me a sharp look. "Campbell, what did you say to him?" "Nothing bad, Tally," Campbell said with a smile. "I just came to fix things. He's an overprotective dad, and now I get it." Talitha turned to me. "Daddy, what did you say to Campbell?" "I'm sorry for how I acted," I said. "I understand why you love her and how much she loves you. Will you forgive me?" She threw her arms around me. "I love you, Daddy, and I always will. It's easy to forgive you, but I need to apologize too. I thought you were just being an idiot." Campbell and I exchanged amused glances. "I kinda was," I said. "And I kinda was too," she admitted. Campbell smirked. "We've all had our moments." "Campbell and Jacinta helped me see things clearly," I said. "I know you love me and care about me. I just wish I'd confided in you sooner." "I wish I'd done the same," Talitha replied. "And I wish I'd answered Jacinta's calls." "Well, you've got work to do," I said. "I said some terrible things to her." "I know," Talitha said. "She told me." "What did you say?" Campbell asked. She didn't tell me. "I said Talitha was my daughter, not hers." Campbell made a small clucking sound. "I don't think Tally agrees with you on that." Talitha nodded. "Technically, you're right, but emotionally, you're wrong. I'm closer to Jacinta than I ever was to Mom. I wish she was my mom. You need to apologize to her." "What?" I said, incredulous. Campbell grinned. "Hope you like crow, dude, because you're about to eat a whole homicide." We all laughed, finished breakfast, and had a wonderful morning. I knew I couldn't waste time. 2 days later, I flew to LA, rented a car, stopped by a flower shop, and bought every rose they had. Jacinta wasn't home, so I let myself in, filled her house with roses, and knelt in the hallway when she returned. She froze, startled, as I said, "I've pulled my head out of my A. I'm so sorry, Peach. Please forgive me." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she ran across the entryway and hugged me tightly. She pressed her cheek to the top of my head, her curls falling like a veil around me. "I hate being mad at you," she whispered. "I'm sorry too, Dax. I know you meant well, but I guess it felt like we were all ganging up on you. We need to communicate better, all of us." I gladly ate that crow. We flew back to Austin and went rafting in Colorado with all the girls. That was my family now, and I decided Campbell was part of it too, a fiery, wild jungle cat of a new daughter. 3 years later, they were all with us in Tarawa when I proposed to Jacinta. The girls helped with the plan, and as Jacinta and I finished dinner, I got down on one knee before dessert. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she burst into tears, catching me off guard. But I slipped the ring on her finger, and she pulled me to my feet, throwing herself into my arms, still crying. Peach," I said. "I was hoping this would make you happy, not bring tears of despair." She giggled softly, snuggling into my shoulder. "I am happy. I cry when I'm really happy too." It was a small curveball, but I knew I'd knocked it out of the park. Our family was complete. I was packing for our annual fishing trip, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. This trip, a long-standing tradition with my closest friends, felt different this year. Normally, it was a group affair with us and our wives, a testament to our inseparable bond since grade school. However, changes were afoot. Kenny had to miss the initial part of the trip due to a business obligation, causing his wife, Pam, to also delay her participation. Then, Don had to cut his trip short for a meeting, leading his wife to stay behind. Once Becky learned that she'd be the only wife on the trip from the start, she opted not to join either. The alteration in plans was a letdown. Our trips were known for strengthening our friendships and spicing up our marriages, filled with laughter and memorable moments. Now it seemed like a shadow of its usual self. Despite my excitement for the trip, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss, particularly missing the intimate moments with Becky. Yet, the week leading up to the trip, Becky and I shared a passionate connection, a fervor that was both exhausting and deeply cherished. It was a bittersweet prelude to an altered tradition. For most of the year, our intimate life had settled into a routine that could be described as more functional than exciting, happening maybe twice a week. This was enough to meet our basic needs, but lacked the fiery passion we had in the early days of our marriage. Back then, our desire for each other was relentless, and we took advantage of every moment and place we could find for intimacy. However, about 5 years ago, this intensity began to wane, and our frequent encounters became less frequent, dwindling to just a few times a week. Becky seemed more and more reluctant, leading to frustration and occasional arguments on my part. Over time, though, I came to terms with this shift in our relationship, learning to handle my disappointment on my own. This context was on my mind that Thursday evening as I sat in the den, trying to relax with a beer after finishing my packing. Becky was upstairs, putting the kids to bed, a routine that had become as much a part of our lives as our changed intimate dynamics. After a while, I heard her footsteps as she came back down and went into the kitchen. She then joined me in the den, a glass of wine in her hand, and a look of concern on her face. "Honey," she began, her voice laced with seriousness, "we need to have an important talk. I understand this might upset you, but please hear me out before responding. I promise to address any questions you have afterward. I should have brought this up months ago, but I needed to gather some information first." Her tone was earnest, hinting at the gravity of what she was about to share. I'm not sure why, but I felt a surge of fear. Becky's demeanor was apologetic and fearful, yet her resolve was unmistakable. It was clear she was about to discuss something serious. After taking a deep breath and another large sip of her wine, she continued, "I know our intimate life hasn't been satisfying for you in the past few years, honey. Frankly, I haven't found much joy in our moments together either. Davy, I love you deeply, but, well, honey, you no longer stir the same excitement in me that you once did. And David, I want to remain your wife. You're an excellent father, a fantastic provider, and a true friend, but I'm seeking more than what you can offer me physically." I could feel anger starting to boil inside me. What was she implying? I thought she had grown distant, but what was the significance of the past week? I was certain I had made a significant impact. Just as I was about to interject, Becky raised her hand. "David, you promised to let me finish speaking before you responded." I bit down hard, forcing myself to lean back into my chair, trying to temper my rising frustration as she went on. "David, there's someone I've known for a while who captivates me in a way I cannot ignore. It's not just about sex. No, it's about making love in a way that I feel we can't anymore. I didn't want to go behind your back. I will still be here for you, but I need to be honest about my needs. Being with him makes me feel alive, reminiscent of how we felt at the beginning of our marriage. It's something I can't seem to get enough of." I jumped from my chair and began screaming at her. "You cheating witch! How could you—" Becky stood and jumped in front of me. She pushed me back and I fell into my chair. She stood over me and continued, "Shut up! I told you that you wouldn't like what I had to say, but you promised to listen to me before you said anything. Now shut up and listen." I found myself rooted to the spot, stunned, as Becky loomed over me, her gaze fierce with a determination I had never seen before. She went on, her words like a cold, unwelcome breeze. "I've spoken with Don about the divorce laws here, and you need to understand the reality. Divorcing me won't be in your favor. You'd end up losing significantly. I'd be entitled to a large portion of your income for alimony and child support. The courts would likely grant me custody of the kids and the house to ensure their stability. Half of our savings and your retirement fund would also be mine. You'd be left with barely enough to live on, let alone maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to. It would mean our children growing up in a broken home, dealing with all the associated difficulties. For your sake and for the kids, you need to come to terms with my decision. Despite everything, I still hold love and respect for you. Our life won't change much on the surface. I'm not cutting you off entirely, it's just that I'll be absent now and then, maybe even taking trips with him for the time we need together." As her words sank in, a mix of disbelief and anger welled up inside me. Watching Becky return to her seat, a silence fell over the room, heavy and tense. After a moment, I managed to find my voice, a mix of hurt and outrage barely contained. "I can't believe this.
How could you do this? After everything, to come to me with such a betrayal. How long has this been going on? Who is he?
Becky looked at me with some anger and said, "Using mean words won't solve anything, honey. I hope you can move past your feelings and we can continue living as we have for the past few years. I won't tell you how long this has been going on or when or where it happens, and I definitely won't tell you who I'm intimate with. It's none of your business, and if I catch you snooping around, I'll have to take actions you won't like."
I've been seeing someone else and I'm done hiding it. I need to be honest because the sneaking around is too much. I want to be upfront about when I go out so you can take care of the kids. But I won't tell you who he is to avoid trouble. If you try to do something bad to him or me, it won't end well, especially for our kids who need you. Just know, if you try to hurt us, there will be consequences.
Once again, I sat there shocked at how calmly Becky laid out her information. She seemed so sure, so prepared. It was clear she had been planning this moment for a while. Despite my thoughts and comments, she had an answer for everything. I said, "I should probably call the guys and let them know I won't be going on this trip. We need to sort some things out, and I have a lot on my plate." I reached for my phone, but Becky grabbed my hand. Becky looked me straight in the eyes and said, "No, you're going on this trip. The kids will stay with your parents as we arranged. I don't plan on being alone for the next 2 weeks, and I don't want you around to cause any trouble or try to find out who I'll be with. You need this time away to process everything. I've made sure you'll actually go on this trip, and you won't like the consequences if you don't. You'll regret it if you change your plans now. My friends and I have everything covered. We have sources in town and almost everywhere you might go. If you try anything to find out about my lover or disrupt our lives, I'll find out, and you'll face serious consequences. You have to accept that my plan is solid, and it's what's best for me. If you cooperate, I'll make sure you don't have a miserable life. You'll continue living much like you have been." Becky went over to the desk and took out a thick envelope from her drawer of papers. She came back to me and handed it over. "Here, so you'll believe me. We made a written report of all your actions for the past month. Read it and you'll see we have it all down. We're aware of everything you do, and if you try to interfere with our plans, we'll know, and I won't go easy on you. Now I'm heading to bed. If you want some action tonight, come up. You'll see not much has to change unless you start causing trouble." I sat there in shock. Who was this woman? And what happened to my wife? I thought I knew her, but now I discover she's conniving and unfaithful. I watched her go upstairs, her hips swaying seductively. She knew she looked amazing and she was using it tonight, but for once, it didn't faze me at all. Finally, I opened the envelope and started reading. I was shocked. The report on me was incredibly detailed, capturing things I'd forgotten until I read them. It seemed like someone had been monitoring my every move, noting even minor incidents like spilling something on my shirt. It documented my glances at other women, something natural for anyone. The thoroughness of the report made me wonder if someone wealthy or connected was behind it, given its detail and scope. The report contained private details, including conversations I thought were private. This made me question if I was being bugged. As I considered my next steps, particularly how to leave my cheating wife without losing out in a divorce, I realized I needed advice. My lifelong friends, who shared a complicated history with me and Becky, seemed like the go-to, but then a dreadful thought struck me. What if Becky was involved with one of them? Seeking their counsel could backfire if the traitor was among them, sabotaging my plans before they even started. Just as I was deep in thought, Becky called out from the top of the stairs, provocatively suggesting I join her in bed rather than mulling over things alone. She then returned to our bedroom, leaving me to consider my next move in this complex situation. I never did go to bed. I spent the night on the couch in the den. Becky woke me up when she started making breakfast. She was mad and made sure I knew it. "Get your sorry butt up, Dave. You need to clean up and get ready for work before the kids notice you didn't sleep in your own room last night. When you come back in 2 weeks, I expect you to act normal. If you mess things up in the family, I've already warned you about the consequences. I'm willing to meet your needs sometimes, but I expect you to do your part too. Just so you know, if you find another woman, I'm filing for divorce." I could feel the rage building up inside me. I yelled, "What's going on? You can mess around and think it's fine, but I can't do the same? Not that I want to, but why is it okay for you and not for me?" Becky smirked and said, "Come on, Dave. We both know you're satisfied with what you're getting from me now. If you go out looking for someone else, it's just to get back at me. I only seek outside the marriage because you're not meeting my needs as a husband. If you could give me what I need,
I wouldn't have to look elsewhere, and I expect the same from you." I stammered. I was so mad I could barely talk, but I finally managed to respond. "I can't believe this. You never once talked to me about needing more or wanting to try something different in bed. You never asked me to do anything we don't normally do. How was I supposed to know you wanted something else if you never told me?" "I always made sure you were satisfied. Most of the time, you had multiple orgasms before we were done. How could I know something was missing when you acted like everything was fine and I was happy?" Becky stood there, then said, "Well, if you're asking now, you're really clueless, huh? It's not just about quantity, dear. It's about quality. You never learned how to please me, and I realized you never would. So I started getting what I needed elsewhere. Now, get dressed. I'm tired of hearing you complain." I went upstairs and went through my usual morning routine. We had a quiet breakfast, and when our son Sean asked what was wrong, I started to explain. But Becky interrupted, saying, "Your father's just dealing with a little issue. He'll be fine after his vacation." She shot me a glare before focusing on her breakfast. At work, I decided to ignore some of Becky's advice and canceled my trip with the guys. We were supposed to leave straight from work and meet at our favorite Denny's to drive together. I had a spacious F-150 truck, so we'd load our gear into it. Roger would ride with me, and Don would take his car since he had to return on Wednesday. I talked to Roger, explaining that something had come up, and I couldn't make it. I offered to let him use my truck to haul the gear. Roger exclaimed, "Oh, Dave, that's not happening. I just spoke to Becky, and she warned me you might try this. She mentioned you've been stressed lately, but she checked with your secretary and confirmed you have nothing important scheduled. I promised her I'd ensure you take this trip. If I have to, I'll come find you. You're coming with us, and you're going to enjoy yourself." I started to object and refuse outright, but then I felt a twinge of fear. What if Roger was... No, Becky said she was leaving this weekend, and Roger was joining me. But wait, Kenny was staying home and coming up midweek. Could it be him or someone else? I was stuck. I needed to think more and make plans. I wanted to buy some surveillance equipment, but how? From the report I read, Becky and her friends tracked my credit card purchases, phone calls, and even cash withdrawals. They could spot unusual spending overnight. I was sitting at my desk, lost in thought, when Becky called. As soon as I answered, she launched into a tirade. "David, I told you to go on your trip, and it's not wise for you to try to snoop into my affairs. Roger just informed me that you tried to back out. This is your final warning. Don't mess with me, or you'll lose everything and never see your children again. Do you understand this time?" She hung up abruptly, leaving me stunned once again. Roger had betrayed me. Did that mean he was involved, or was he genuinely concerned for me? Come to think of it, my old friends didn't seem as close as they used to be. It felt like they were now Becky's friends, and I was just tagging along. Could it be? Nah, not all of them. Anyway, I decided to go on the trip and met the guys at Denny's. While they were joking around, I sat gloomily. Finally, Don asked me what was wrong. I hesitated for a moment, then said, "Becky has some crazy idea, and I don't know how to deal with it. I can hardly believe she meant what she said, but if she did, my marriage is in trouble." Roger glanced at Don and remarked, "You know Becky's style, Don. She rang me up earlier today saying Loverboy here was trying to bail on our trip. She mentioned he's been on edge and hard to deal with lately and could use this time off to clear his head. I assured her we'd ensure he joined us and had a good time." Don chimed in, "Yeah, I've noticed his moodiness too over the past few months. He hasn't been as lively with us. A little adjustment in attitude won't hurt. And we can help with that. I've got beer and his favorite whiskey in my car." Turning to me, he added, "Nothing used to stop us from enjoying our cabin time. Sure, the ladies won't be there this time, but hey, more drinks and stories for us." We headed out, driving to the fishing spot by the stream. It was a short 2-hour ride, and we arrived in time for some serious drinking before bed. The next morning, both guys insisted on fishing, so we set off. The fishing helped me forget about the past few days, but thoughts of Becky crept back as we returned to the cabin. I couldn't believe she meant what she said, but it lingered in my mind. Instead of focusing on what I needed to do, I let the guys convince me to keep drinking with them. Later, during supper, as we continued drinking, Don looked at me and asked, "Okay, Dave, spill it. You look like you lost your best buddy, but I'm still here. What's eating you?" I thought, why not? If I didn't talk to someone I trusted, I'd lose it. These guys were trustworthy. We'd been pals since school started. I spilled the beans to Don and Roger about my marriage's declining bed life over the last 3 years and Becky's bombshell from Thursday evening. After I finished, Don looked at me and said, "Wow, Dave,
Are you sure that's what Becky said? I can't believe she'd even think something like that. We've known her for years, and she's the sweetest, most caring woman I know. Yeah, I know. But that's exactly what she said, as far as I recall. Is it really true? Don leaned back and said, Well, Dave, I can't predict the outcome of a divorce, but she's right about some things. If she's really doing what you say, you have to decide how to handle it. If she's discreet, you need to consider if breaking up the family and the emotional toll on the children, you and Becky, is worth it. In custody battles, the courts usually favor the mother. Unless she's proven unfit, you'd likely lose custody of your kids. It's true you'd have to financially support them until they're grown, including college expenses. Because she doesn't work, you'd have to pay alimony until she remarries. You might lose your home, either giving it to her or selling it and splitting the money. You'd also have to share your savings and retirement funds. Child support is calculated by a formula that heavily burdens the supporting parent. Expect to lose a big chunk of your income for child support. You'd also need to provide health care for the kids. Dave was stunned. Hearing his attorney friend lay out the situation was even worse than Becky warning him about the consequences of her infidelity. I have to know. She won't tell me whom she is with, and I need to know. When I find out, I will make sure she isn't with him any longer. Dave, as your friend, I get where you're coming from. But as a court officer, I have to advise against that. It's tough, but I'm obligated to report these things. If harm comes to any of Becky's lovers, I'll have to report you. My suggestion? Just deal with it and keep things normal. Maybe if she's cheating, she'll change her mind or get it out of her system. Either way, it seems like sticking to the status quo would be better for you. Don, I can't believe you're saying this. How would you feel if Shelley did something like that and threatened you? Would you just accept her cheating like Becky expects me to? Don looked uneasy and said, No, I'd probably be as upset as you are. But I trust Shelley wouldn't do that. She loves me and knows I'm the best partner she could have. I provide for our family, and she wouldn't risk losing that or hurting our kids or me. Buddy, you should just accept your situation. If Becky's as vigilant as you say based on that report, you're in trouble. If you try to investigate her affair, she'll find out and retaliate. Heck, she might even know about this conversation if she's monitoring you closely. Did she know where we were going? Shoot, I didn't even think about that. Darn it, now I have more to worry about. Dave was confused by Roger's constant smile and Don's oddly happy expression during their conversation. He couldn't believe his friends were so relaxed about Becky treating him badly. Finally, he sighed, Well, forget it. Let's just have some more drinks. The next morning, Dave woke up before his friends. Feeling the need for solitude, he grabbed his fishing gear and headed upstream to his favorite spot. Just as he was about to start fishing, his cell phone rang. He always kept it with him, although reception was spotty in some areas due to weak signals. He was surprised to get reception here. Seeing it was Becky calling, he chose not to answer. After Becky left a message, he listened to it. He was shocked to hear her say, Well, honey, my sources say you got some good advice from Don last night. I hope you're going to follow it. I love you, and you're too good of a provider and father to lose. But if you do something foolish, I can manage the kids without you. Now have fun. Dave stared at the phone in disbelief. He knew the cabin didn't have cell service, and there was no landline. So how did she find out about his conversation with the guys? Oh no, his gear must be bugged, and someone must be nearby to pick up the transmission. He needed to search for it later. Dave didn't notice Roger and Don standing at the edge of the trees while he listened to the message. They grinned, gave each other a thumbs up, then vanished back into the woods, heading towards the cabin. Roger glanced at Don and asked, Do you think that'll do it? Or should we keep the pressure on for a bit? I reckon we should keep those detailed reports going for a month or two, and we gotta keep urging him to just accept it, Don replied. We've got a good thing happening now. If we can persuade him to let Becky keep fooling around and spend some full nights and weekends with us, we'll be way ahead. Imagine how much better it'll be to have longer sessions with her without any time constraints. She's so hooked on what we give her in bed that she'll do anything we say just to have more. If we play it smart, he can clue in our wives about the issue, and we can tell them we're out at night helping him figure out what's going on. That'll be solid cover. Dave fished until nearly noon, but his mind wasn't on it. He spent most of his time pondering his marriage, trying to figure out how to uncover Becky's affair, end it, and get back at her. However, he knew he couldn't do anything until he found out who, when, where, and why, if possible. On a cozy Friday evening, as the anticipation of their friend's arrival grew, Becky and the man beside her shared a warm, intimate moment. After spending the day preparing for a weekend at the cabin, They finally had some time to themselves. Becky, feeling playful and affectionate, approached him with a twinkle in her eye. She handed him a drink and sat close, their conversation flowing easily. The atmosphere was charged with excitement for the weekend ahead. They shared laughs, reminisced about past adventures, and eagerly discussed plans for the days to come. As they sat together, the connection between them deepened. Becky, feeling bold, leaned in for a tender kiss, which he warmly reciprocated. Their affectionate exchange soon turned into a gentle caress, as they continued to express their fondness for each other. Becky, feeling the warmth of the moment, whispered sweet nothings into his ear. The air was filled with anticipation, not just for the immediate tenderness they shared, but also for the joy that the coming days with their friends would bring. They talked about their friend's upcoming arrival, speculating with excitement about the activities they had planned. The mention of a friend's expected visit on Wednesday added to the bubbling excitement, sparking further conversation about the adventures that awaited them. As the evening progressed, they remained close, cherishing each other's company. Their connection was a testament to their deep bond, one that was amplified by the shared joy of the imminent reunion with their close friends. In that moment, they were reminded of the simple pleasures of companionship, the anticipation of good times ahead, and the beauty of moments spent with someone special. Becky exclaimed, "Oh God, I've been craving this for so long. I can't wait for the others to arrive. Isn't Dawn supposed to be here early Wednesday?" "Yeah, baby. Then you'll have both of us for 2 whole nights before I have to help babysit your loving hubby." "Oh God, I'll be so relieved when we can all 3 be together at once. Just being with 1 or 2 of you at a time has been tough after what you've done to me. There's no way Dave alone can satisfy me anymore. Do you think we've covered everything? I adore him, and he's a wonderful provider and father. I don't want to lose him." "Yeah, I think we can keep him in check." "Yeah, I just hope Dave doesn't start confiding in our wives and causing trouble. We've been doing fine the last 3 years. I think we should have been content with how things were instead of getting greedy like this. Having you to ourselves all night or on a long trip sounds nice, but I'm not sure we can push Dave this hard. We might have unleashed something uncontrollable." "Well, the bugs we planted and the few things we found that make him look bad should make him back off. I just wish he wasn't so straight and honorable. It's unbelievable we haven't found anything shady he's done. How can a man in business for himself not take advantage of situations to make extra cash? Oh, by the way, Becky, are you still keeping an eye on the finances and transactions like we discussed? Yeah, I convinced the bank to limit his cash withdrawals, but I can't control his check writing. At least we can track them if he does. I wish I had a way to monitor the business more closely. Now I regret pushing him to hire office help so I could stay home with the kids and be a housewife." Becky chuckled, then added, "Of course, if I hadn't insisted on staying home, we wouldn't be having as much fun, would we? I was so frustrated only being with you all a couple nights a month or on trips. Being a stay-at-home mom allowed us to play more. And now, with this plan, we can play whenever we want." Dave was gloomy and preoccupied by the river. His friends attempted to chat with him and lift his spirits, but they weren't making much headway. They got him drunk on Tuesday evening. After he passed out from intoxication, Don and Roger retreated to the porch to converse quietly. Roger expressed concern, saying, "I'm starting to fret, Don. We've been talking to him for 4 days, and if anything, he's becoming more determined to leave Becky and seek revenge on her lover. He's on the brink of exploding and going wild. How are we going to manage this situation now? It all seemed so promising and simple when we devised the plan to control him and spend more time with her. What if he finds out and tells our wives?" Don reassured him, saying, "Relax, Roger. I can manipulate him in the divorce proceedings and paint her as an angel. Even if she does divorce him, so what? We only embarked on this because she said she wanted to keep him around. I'll admit, banging her while she's married to him gives me a thrill, but she'd still be just as enjoyable if she weren't married. We just need to prevent him and our wives from discovering the truth so we don't get screwed over. We might need to resort to some physical persuasion, but let's wait and see how things unfold in a week or 2. Dave couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but he had awakened and caught snippets of their discussion on the front porch. He understood they were upset that he was stubborn about accepting Becky's infidelity, and they believed they needed to convince him to be more tolerant. Now, not only was he angry with her, but he was also angry with them. Before drifting back to sleep, he resolved to handle the situation without their assistance. Over the next few days, Dave grew more distant from his friends. Roger and Kenny grew genuinely concerned when all he would say about the situation was, "I'm going to find out who the woman is sleeping with, and both she and they are going to pay big time." Finally, the day arrived for them to head home. Once again, Roger rode with Dave, but there was no conversation in the truck. Kenny drove his own car, and as soon as they reached an area with good cell service, he called Don. Don and Becky sat in Dave's living room and listened as Kenny reported on Dave. "He's boiling with anger. If anything, he's even more determined to make you pay than he was when I got to the cabin. I'm not sure what to do, but I think we should lay low until he calms down. If he catches us, it could get ugly." Becky sat in shock, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she was almost hyperventilating. Don, with clenched jaws and a red face, sat beside her. After a brief conversation with Kenny, Don turned to Becky. He pulled her close and began caressing her breasts to calm her down. As he touched her, he said, "Becky, don't worry. I didn't want to resort to drastic measures if we didn't have to. But it seems like we have no choice now. See how he behaves this weekend and let me know on Sunday evening. If it seems like he's going to cause trouble, we'll file on Monday. I can freeze all your personal accounts, and I believe I can freeze the business accounts pending court approval for all expenditures. We can convince the judge that he might drain your accounts and ruin the business if we don't take control." Dave came home late on Friday night and found Becky in the living room, looking upset as though she had been crying. She seemed disheveled and was only wearing one of his shirts. As Dave walked by, he noticed something odd about her appearance that made him very upset. Becky looked at him defiantly and seemed to be provoking him with her posture. Dave was really angry and just walked by Becky without saying anything. Becky tried to follow him into their bedroom and even attempted to join him in the shower, but Dave firmly told her to leave, expressing his disappointment and anger about the situation. He told her that he had hoped they could resolve their issues, but now he felt there was no chance for that. Dave warned Becky that even though she had hurt him, he would find a way to respond to her actions and those of the person or people she was involved with. After getting himself together, Dave quickly packed his things into his truck, going back and forth from the house. While packing, he overheard Becky on the phone. One of the last things he tried to do before leaving was to transfer money from their joint bank accounts. But he discovered he was locked out because the password had been changed. This made him even more angry. Turning around, he saw Becky watching him, which only added to his frustration. Becky appeared remorseful as she spoke. "I hoped you'd come to your senses and we wouldn't reach this point. You realize you're making a grave mistake, right? I love you more than any man I've ever known. I don't want to lose you. If you persist, you'll risk losing the business and everything we've built. Just so you're aware, I've hired Don as my lawyer. I just spoke with him and informed him of your behavior. He'll be in touch." Dave was stunned. He knew Don was also her friend, but geez, he'd been Dave's attorney since he started practicing law. He couldn't believe Don would betray him like this. Dave left his home and drove straight to his office and warehouse complex. He planned to stay in his office and conference room for a while. On the way in, he stopped at the gate and spoke to the guard. "I'm having some trouble with my wife. She and her lover have threatened me. I need you to call in extra security and keep all unauthorized persons off the property." Saturday morning around 10 a.m., Dave was leaving the complex to grab breakfast when he got halted at the gate. A man approached him, confirmed his identity, then handed him an envelope saying, "You've been served." After the man left, Dave opened the envelope and found a restraining order. It stated that he couldn't come within 300 feet of his wife, children, or their home. Additionally, there was an order requiring court approval for any expenditures from his personal or business accounts, preventing him from depleting the company's assets before divorce proceedings, which were set to start the following Monday. After breakfast, Dave went to his assistant's house. When she opened the door, she remarked, "Dave, you look awful. What's wrong?" "I need to talk. I need help, and you're the only person I can trust. I'm sorry to bother you on the weekend, but I'm in trouble, and I have no idea who I can trust or talk to. She stepped back and gestured for Dave to come in. "Come on in, Dave. Would you like some coffee?" Dave followed her into the kitchen, where he saw her husband, Thaddeus, sitting at the table. It seemed he had interrupted their brunch, as there were plates with eggs still on the table. "I'm sorry. I guess I should leave. Thaddeus looked up at Dave and said, "You look terrible, Dave. Sit down and talk to us, for heaven's sake." Dave slowly recounted to the couple everything that had happened in his life since 2 weeks ago Thursday. Then he expressed, "I'm at a loss for what to do now or how to help myself. My supposed best friends spent the last 2 weeks urging me to let Becky continue her affair on the side. They argue that since she's been doing it for years and I never noticed, why should I disrupt things? And now, Don, my former best friend, is collaborating with Becky as her attorney, entangling me in legal complications. I can't even spend money without court approval, and I can't get that until at least Monday. My best friend has taken Becky's case, so I'm cut off there. I'm not even sure I have enough money to eat. All my credit cards were declined when I tried to pay for breakfast. Gertrude leaned back and said, "Dave, I can't believe Becky would do this to you." She turned to her husband and asked, "Thad, can't we offer him some financial assistance?" Her husband nodded in agreement. Dave sat at the table feeling angry, helpless, and determined to seek retribution like never before. Thad pondered for a moment before stating, "If what you say is true, you need some serious help. I just hope there isn't a bug hidden in your clothes somewhere." His eyes narrowed, and he added, "Come with me, Dave." They headed downstairs into the walkout basement. Stopping at the bottom of the stairs, Thad instructed, "Dave, undress right now and give me your clothes. There's a shower over there, and I'll bring you some of my clothes to wear. I'll take yours to the front door. After you've cleaned up, we'll talk. I doubt there's a bug in our house, but they might have followed you here and planted a listening device outside." Dave changed into some old sweatpants belonging to Thad, and then all three of them retreated into a cement storm shelter beneath the stairway. He felt foolish as he began to speak, but Thad and Gertrude stopped him. They spent the next hour communicating through written notes, planning out their course of action. After covering all possible scenarios, Thad left to contact individuals whom he believed could assist Dave. They agreed that Dave would have minimal interaction with these people, and Thad and Gertrude would lend him the necessary funds to start the investigation. While it was assumed that Becky would halt her activities, they planned to monitor her and Dave's 3 friends for a while. On Sunday, Dave, Thad, and Gertrude decided to catch up over lunch, enjoying each other's company and sharing laughs. At the same time, Becky hosted a meeting at her house with Don, Kenny, and Roger to discuss some pressing matters. After their meeting concluded, they all took a moment to relax and share their thoughts on the situation. Roger, looking concerned, broke the silence. "I'm feeling uneasy about all this," he admitted. "I'm not sure if it was a good idea to meet today. What if Dave finds out we were here? Maybe we should keep a low profile until we figure things out. We had a stable situation for over 3 years, and pushing the boundaries now seems risky. I'm worried this might not end well for us." He continued to share his anxieties about recent events, expressing doubt over their strategy and concern over Dave's recent activities, particularly his time spent with his secretary and her husband. Roger mentioned that their surveillance hadn't picked up anything suspicious, but he was still nervous about the potential repercussions of their actions and decisions. "Stop complaining. We've got Dave completely under control. He's unable to access any money, and we're keeping such close tabs on him that we'll know his every move before he even makes it. Right now, he's with his personal assistant and her husband, feeling sorry for himself. If he tries to leave, we'll be alerted before he's even out of sight. He can't even make a call without us knowing what he's saying, whether it's from his phone or hers." On Monday morning, Dave started searching for a new attorney to represent him. He spoke with several and scheduled appointments with 2. It was a challenge for him because Don had been his legal counsel for years, but now that Don was representing Becky, he had to find someone else. Eventually, he decided to hire Sally Hawk, who impressed him during the interview and came highly recommended. Their first course of action was to initiate legal proceedings to release Dave's business accounts and secure enough funds for his living expenses. They also opted to hire another private investigator firm to monitor Becky. Dave authorized wiretaps on his house and video surveillance. Furthermore, he gave Sally the green light to start divorce proceedings based on adultery. Later that evening, Thad handed Dave the footage captured the previous day. Naturally, Dave was devastated. Discovering that Becky was involved with all 3 of his friends only fueled his anger further. However, he now knew who he was up against. The following morning, he went to his office and made 5 copies of the CD. He distributed one to each of his friends' wives, one to his attorney, kept one for himself, and placed the original in a safe deposit box. Additionally, he uploaded the video to various amateur XXX sites on the internet, using the participants' real names. He set up the site as pay-per-view, with the funds directed from a PayPal account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. He smirked, realizing Don had given him a key to his office, allowing Dave to set up the site from there, implicating Don if the tracing led back. Dave also sent still images of Becky's actions to several of her friends and family members via email. He executed all of this, using the free computers at the college library to avoid suspicion. Although he briefly considered using Don's office, he dismissed the idea, knowing it would appear suspicious as Don wouldn't engage in such activities. Using the college computers was straightforward for Dave. He had done so multiple times before without getting caught. Despite the requirement of a student ID card and password for logging in, Dave often found machines left logged on, allowing him to use someone else's credentials. Moreover, the lack of CCTV security cameras at the local college meant he didn't need to worry about being captured on video in the vicinity. On Wednesday, Dave had a blast fielding phone calls from people who had watched the video. In the early afternoon, Becky called him in tears. She asked, "How could you do that? I thought you loved me. I told you it was just Zex because you couldn't give me what I needed. How could you ruin my life like that?" Dave chuckled and replied, "Rebecca, I didn't ruin your life. You did. I'm just delivering the payback I promised if you went through with your plans. Frankly, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure you've been cheating on me for a while. There were plenty of times when one of the guys would make sure I was out and I'd come home late. A lot of things that didn't add up then make sense now. By the time I'm done with you and those jerks, you'll regret ever doing this." Later that afternoon, Becky's sister called. She said, "You poor fool. Looks like you finally figured out about your oh-so-perfect wife. I assume you're the one who sent this video. Well, now it seems she and I can share the boys. I didn't know she was with them until I got this." Dave shuddered as she hung up, her maniacal laughter echoing in his mind all night. Don also called, and as soon as Dave answered, he started yelling. Dave played along upon realizing it was Don. He kept Don on the line for almost 15 minutes. Don made threats of both physical and legal harm, saying, "You jerk. By the time I'm through with you, you'll wish you never crossed me. I'll have your wife whenever I want, and we'll have most of your money too. If you had just done what I told her, you'd still have a family, money, and a life. After I'm done with you, I'll have the guys rough you up. I've been with that girl since high school, and I'll continue to be long after you're gone, you jerk. Enjoy living in the dumps because that's where you'll be when I'm through. I'll file every lawsuit I can find and bleed you dry just to defend against them." Later calls from Becky's parents were distressing. Her mother was in tears as she asked, "Dave, how could you do this to Becky? I understand she hurt you deeply, but spreading pictures of her everywhere was too vengeful. Couldn't you have resolved this in a more civilized way?" By the time Dave decided to head home for the evening, he felt content with his actions so far. He was confident that the computerized answering system his company had installed would prove its worth, especially from the recordings it made that day alone. Initially, he had concerns about how his then-attorney and friend Don advised him to set up the system with the telecom provider. When a call came in, the computer would answer and give a warning before recording began. The warning stated, "Thank you for calling Central U.S. Inventory, Logistics, and Security Company. All phone calls are recorded for later use. If you do not want your call recorded, please hang up now. If you wish to speak to someone, please press 0 to be connected to an operator." It seemed Don either didn't consider the warning or was too furious to heed it, because all his threats and boasting were captured after the warning he insisted on including in the system. Dave saw this as poetic justice. Unfortunately, all the individuals involved in Becky's circle stopped associating with her once the legal cases were initiated. Fortunately, Thad's acquaintance managed to capture video and audio recordings on the first Saturday, as none of the private investigators recorded any incriminating evidence. While some suspicious phone calls were obtained, they were mostly ambiguous and of little use. One of Sally's initial actions was to report Don to the State Bar Association. His law license was promptly suspended, and he was permanently disbarred due to his unethical conduct and threats, even before the divorce and legal proceedings concluded. Dave's divorce was finalized, with Becky receiving a small portion, around 25%, of the marital assets. Dave retained ownership of his company. Furthermore, Dave was granted custody of the children, primarily due to a subtle detail initially overlooked. During the photo session, when Thad's acquaintance captured images of Becky and the others, they inadvertently photographed another individual. This picture not only captured the scene of the event, but also showed a child peeking into the house from the backyard through the patio door. When the judge saw this evidence, full custody of the children was awarded to Dave. Dave's legal actions against Don proved highly successful. He was awarded $1.3 million in damages for breaching attorney-client privilege and for Don's misconduct in representing Becky while still acting as Dave's attorney. Don faced censure for his inappropriate relationship with Becky and various ethical violations, leading to fines payable to the state. As Dave pursued legal recourse against Don, Don's financial situation deteriorated significantly, nearing bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Shelley, Don's wife, depleted most of their remaining marital assets during their divorce. Similarly, Pam, Kenny's wife, received a significant portion of his assets after their divorce. Surprisingly, Roger and Trixie remained married, as it was revealed that Trixie had willingly engaged in the group's activities. However, Roger grew discontented with his friend's continued exploitation of Trixie. When Don and Kenny moved in with Roger after being ousted from their homes, tensions escalated. Kenny's frustration boiled over one evening, leading to a violent altercation where he assaulted Don and Roger. Kenny was hospitalized due to injuries sustained in the fight, and Don and Kenny were subsequently convicted and sentenced to a year in jail. Consequently, Roger and Trixie ended their marriage. Reflecting on these events nearly a year later, Dave and Gertrude discussed a news article detailing the conflict involving Don, Kenny, and Roger over Trixie. Gertrude then inquired whether Dave maintained any contact with Rebecca, noting her supervised visits with their children. Dave glanced at her and replied firmly, "No, we only communicate when necessary, usually about the kids. I have no interest in speaking with her, and if I could avoid it entirely, I would." "I was just curious. You two seemed perfect for years, and then—" "Well, I've always wondered if you knew why she did what she did. I just can't comprehend why a woman who loves her husband would act that way." Dave gazed at Gertrude, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He clenched his jaw and bit his lip before reaching into his desk drawer. Retrieving a folder, he handed it to Gertrude. "I don't know why I held on to this letter. I'm not even sure why I agreed to read it. Remember when Becky's mother visited the office in tears about 7 months ago? She gave me this letter and insisted I read it before she left, so I did." Gertrude opened the folder and read the following. "Dear David, you may question why I still call you dearest, but despite everything, you're the man I love. I've made mistakes that hurt you, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. My actions weren't intentional, but I need to come clean about them. Our past relationships with our high school friends were complicated, but they didn't affect us until I made a mistake on our 9th anniversary. You were busy with work, and I ended up drinking too much at a Valentine's Day party. Feeling lonely, things took a turn when Don and Kenny drove me home. Reminiscing about past encounters led to a moment of weakness where I gave in to temptation with them. That night, I experienced feelings and pleasures that were intense and new. This led to more encounters with them, sometimes individually or together, whenever you were away. These moments were filled with excitement and fear of getting caught, which somehow added to the thrill. Don later suggested an arrangement to avoid the risk of getting caught, believing you might accept it to keep our family intact. I convinced myself you might agree, hoping to avoid losing you and our children. But I realize now how much pain and betrayal my actions have caused you. I'm truly sorry for the hurt I've caused. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Yours always, Becky." Gertrude glanced up after reading the letter. Her eyes were teary, but she held back her anger. "Dave, I truly believe she still loves you more than anyone else. I know she's hurting. But Dave, she was nearly as much a victim as you were. I think your friend Don was a predator. You know, over the years, we've both heard some terrible rumors about him. I wouldn't be surprised if he intentionally got her drunk that first night. No man of high moral character, no true friend would take advantage of her like she said he did." "Yeah, I know, Gertie, but... well, I'm not entirely sure she gave me the whole truth there. She always seemed to pay more attention to Don than I would have liked. I brushed it off, but there were several times we argued after a party because I thought she was too friendly, letting him take too many liberties. But I never caught them in anything substantial to confront them about. I have to admit, after Don's phone call when I finally caught them, thanks to you and Thad, I had enough doubts to get DNA tests done on the children. You can't imagine how relieved I was when the tests confirmed I was their father. Well, anyway, I believe she thinks she loves me, but I don't think it's genuine love. It's more like infatuation, maybe a deep affection. I was easy to live with, a good provider and father. I now realize I was probably her last choice, and we married because... well, I'm not sure why she married me. I loved her deeply, but I don't think she felt that same depth of love for me. I believe that's why she cheated and continued to do so. She was selfish and only cared about her own pleasure, needs, and desires.
Imagine, just picture this scenario. A wealthy but inadequate son barges into your home, your fortress, insisting he's taking your wife for a few nights. How would you react? And to top it off, he starts openly threatening you. My initial impulse was to tackle him and deliver a few punches to his arrogant face, but I opted for a different approach. As I wrapped up loading my tools into my pickup truck that Thursday afternoon, my mood wasn't the best. The client I'd been dealing with for the past fortnight seemed unable to make up his mind about the staircase project, constantly requesting alterations to the original plan. The latest change demanded this morning was so extensive that it necessitated dismantling a significant portion of the work already done. Furthermore, consulting with the architect and engineer was imperative, as accommodating the client's latest whim meant redrawing the structural plans. Consequently, the following day unexpectedly turned into an off day. I'm Kenneth Morrison, the lead artisan and proprietor of a small woodworking carpentry shop specializing in crafting top-tier staircases. My clientele comprises affluent mansion owners, hotels, restaurants, and offices willing to shell out well over $50,000 for a bespoke artistic staircase. At 34, I'd been married to Daphne Tupper, 29, for 4 years. Daphne, a successful lawyer at Kramer, Boylan & Hendricks, a law firm specializing in commercial and intellectual property law. We hadn't yet started a family, primarily because Daphne wanted to establish her career first. Arriving home at 4:30 p.m., I was taken aback to find my wife's car in the driveway. Typically, she worked late on Thursdays to have a shorter day on Fridays. Entering through the back door, my usual path after a day at a construction site, I noticed a slight water pressure problem. It was unusual to find Daphne in the upstairs shower at this time, as she typically showered either in the morning or before bed. After swiftly changing into more comfortable clothes, I made my way upstairs to investigate why my wife was home so early on a Thursday afternoon. As I suspected, Daphne had recently finished showering and was now putting on some enticing black fishnet stockings. A brand new black dress lay on the bed, patiently awaiting its turn to be worn. "Hey, honey, why are you home so early? Did I forget something? Do we have plans tonight that slipped my mind?" I asked. She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, a hint of nervousness apparent, though she tried to conceal it. Letting out a sigh, she replied, "No, Kenneth, you haven't forgotten anything. I'm going out tonight and you're not. I'll be away until Sunday afternoon spending the weekend with Derek Kramer." "What? What are you talking about? Is it a business trip or something?" I inquired. "No, Kenneth, it's not a business trip. Derek has a hotel suite reserved for him and me. I'll be back next week, but this weekend is for him," she said, her tone defiant though her words seemed rehearsed. "No, you can't. I don't want my wife spending a weekend with another man. What is this nonsense?" I protested. "Well, you better accept it, Kenneth, because that's what Derek wants, and I advise you not to cross him," she chuckled. "So you're willingly going along with this scheme. You expect me to just accept it, suppress my feelings, and let you go, and then you'll return as my faithful wife after this weekend?" I retorted, my words dripping with sarcasm. "I never said it's just for this weekend. Derek mentioned he wants it to happen occasionally. So, yes, deal with it and keep quiet. Trust me, your life will be much simpler if you go along with it," she stated firmly. "We'll see about that. I won't tolerate this, Daphne. You better think about what you're doing because I won't let that arrogant guy control my life. If you think I'm a pawn you can manipulate without objection, you're in for a rude awakening," I warned. By then, she had finished getting ready for the evening. I went downstairs, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and noticed a Mercedes parking in front of the house. Mr. Smug himself emerged, walked up to the front door, and rang the bell. "Kenneth, that's Derek. Will you go answer the door?" she yelled from upstairs. I quickly punched in a code on the back door alarm panel, set up my cell phone for video recording, and put it in my t-shirt pocket to capture everything. Then I waited in the living room. I'd known Derek Kramer since Daphne started working for CBH 3 years ago. Our first meeting was at their office Christmas party. Derek, a man in his 40s, radiated a dominant aura. He seemed friendly with his partners and flirtatious with female employees and wives of male employees. However, around his male employees and the husbands of female employees, he was arrogant and disdainful. I took an instant dislike to the guy. Daphne descended the stairs with visible anger and opened the door while I observed from the living room, sipping my beer. She apologized for the delay, expressing uncertainty about her husband's manners, and then whispered something to Derek, though I couldn't discern her words. Derek, upon entering the living room, confronted me about an apparent issue with Daphne spending the weekend with him. His demeanor resembled that of a school principal addressing a disobedient child. Surprised by his audacity to assume authority in my own home, I firmly warned him to leave, my fists clenched. He laughed loudly with Daphne smirking beside him. He dismissed the idea of involving the police, confident they wouldn't intervene. Upon noticing my cell phone recording, he snatched it, attempting to stop the footage. Failing due to the password lock, he angrily threw it onto the ceramic floor, which predictably won the confrontation. He asserted his dominance, declaring that Daphne would spend the weekend with him regardless of my feelings, emphasizing that my opinion was inconsequential. Any attempt to intervene would result in dire consequences, including the exposure of alleged criminal activities. He warned against upsetting Daphne or taking any action that could jeopardize his plans. I decided to act oblivious. It's highly unlikely that such information would become public knowledge. I've never been involved in money laundering or had any association with illegal materials involving children, I replied mechanically. That can be easily arranged. Uploading material to your computer is a simple task. I possess content that could quickly tarnish your reputation. I chose to feign even more ignorance. Illegal materials involving children are, well, illegal. If you upload something like that to my computer, wouldn't that mean you're already in possession of illegal material? I asked innocently. That's the difference between you and me. Some things that are illegal for you are perfectly acceptable for individuals of power like myself who have the right connections. I highly suggest you stick to your working-class antics and refrain from bothering people of higher standing. Do you understand? I could hardly believe what I had just heard. Such dialogue would be excessive, even in a comedy movie. Yet the person in my living room was speaking earnestly. Oh, and one more thing. Please refrain from seeking revenge against me or Daphne. That includes attempting to retaliate by engaging with someone else closely. I want to avoid any potential transmission of infections from you to Daphne and then to me. All right, I won't ask Daphne to withhold lovemaking from you. At least not for now. Can't you see I'm not being unreasonable? Basically, if you cross any boundaries, I'll be aware of it. Okay? Now let's go, honey. They returned to the front door. Daphne grabbed her overnight bag and left without saying goodbye or acknowledging my presence. Honey. He referred to my wife as honey. The entire situation was so surreal that I couldn't summon pure anger. My emotions were a mix of anger and astonishment. At that moment, I silently thanked the burglar who had broken into my house the year before I met Daphne. I was so disturbed that I had a comprehensive surveillance and alarm system installed, complete with motion-activated cameras and voice-activated microphones that could record everything in the house and store it in the cloud. I never let on to Daphne that the system could be set to recording mode while we were at home, ensuring she remained unaware when I activated it just before she opened the front door for that despicable individual. Simultaneously, I had initiated the recording on my cell phone, serving more as a decoy. My hope was that Kramer would notice it and figure out a way to turn it off. This would make him feel less guarded, and he might speak more freely. Thinking he was no longer being filmed, I hoped this could be a valuable source of information for a potential divorce. The scoundrel gave me much more than I expected. The cell phone now scattered on the floor was actually my business cell phone. After dealing with a wealthier clientele, I quickly realized that providing them with my main cell phone meant being on call almost 24/7. A dedicated business cell phone allowed me to turn it off at the end of the day, and I could attend to messages the following morning. So at least I wasn't without a means of communication. I picked up my personal phone and called my business lawyer and best friend Harry. 10 years ago, Harry Davenport became the husband of my elder sister, Jennifer. They enjoyed a blissful marriage until tragedy struck. 4 years into their union, Jennifer tragically drowned during a trip to Guadalupe with her 3 friends. Despite the heartbreaking loss, Harry remained an integral part of our family, earning our love and respect. 3 years after Jennifer's passing, Harry found love again in Christine. They tied the knot after a year of dating, and my parents, Daphne and I, were honored guests at their wedding. To this day, Harry and Christine remain like family to me. Recently, I found myself in a desperate situation and urgently sought Harry's help. After explaining the threats made by someone named Kramer and recounting the events of my wife's private weekend getaway, Harry immediately offered his support. He advised me to stay indoors, avoid contacting anyone, and switch off all communication devices, assuring me that he and Christine would arrive in an hour with dinner. Harry's advice provided much-needed reassurance. Reflecting on the past hour's events, I realized that Daphne, my wife, had been captivated by Kramer's power and charm. I never imagined she would forsake our love for him. It was a harsh realization that our bond wasn't as strong as I thought. My journey with Daphne began 5 years ago at a friend of a friend's birthday party. Despite being unfamiliar with most of the attendees, I struck up a conversation with Daphne, the sister of the birthday boy's army buddy stationed in Afghanistan. Our connection flourished, leading to a week of dating and eventual marriage the following year. During that time, I remained employed by Mr. Duncan, the founder of the small company where I worked. Craig Duncan was highly skilled in woodworking and well-known locally. Despite his expertise in woodworking, his skills in accounting and management were lacking. While still in college, he had hired me as a part-time accountant to handle his bookkeeping. A few months into my role, Mr. Duncan secured 3 substantial contracts that demanded more time than he could spare. Although these projects were challenging, his clients insisted he take them on. Consequently, he asked for my assistance in the field. Initially, my tasks involved running errands, acquiring supplies, and providing support. With handling larger pieces, my rapid learning and aptitude for the work became evident, and after overcoming the initial learning curve, I could independently handle simpler tasks or be a valuable asset on more complex projects. While pursuing my accounting degree, my passion for hands-on work led me to pursue an apprenticeship. After a few years, I earned certification and became Mr. Duncan's associate. Upon his retirement, my parents supported me financially, enabling me to buy out his share over a 2-year period. Despite being viewed as an uneducated shop worker by the lawyers at CBH, my company flourished, focusing on fewer but more lucrative projects. Over the preceding months, I had hired 2 assistants, and my net income and value surpassed those of many lawyers associated with my wife. Despite this success, even my wife was unaware of these details. My contemplation was interrupted by Christine and Harry, who arrived with Chinese takeout and beer. "Are you okay, Kenneth?" Christine asked, offering a warm hug. "I can't believe Daphne did that to you. This is so unlike her," Harry reassured, giving me a supportive hug. "Don't worry, buddy. We'll sort things out. Let's have dinner, and then I'll take a look at your recording." I shared the details of Daphne's unwelcoming reception when I arrived home earlier that afternoon. After dinner, I grabbed my laptop and retrieved the files containing recordings from both the camera and microphone. Fortunately, the conversations were exceptionally clear. "I can't believe what I just heard," Harry exclaimed. "Quite the arrogant guy," I remarked. "No, more like downright foolish," Harry replied. "I mean, this guy is what, 40, 42 years old? That means he has about 15 years of law practice under his belt. He's not a newbie. He's so full of himself that it never occurs to him that sometimes you just need to keep quiet. Your clever trick of making him think he wasn't being recorded after he destroyed your cell phone worked like a charm. He took the bait and spilled everything we need to know." "Okay, but can I legally use it since it was recorded without his consent?" I inquired. "Absolutely. This is your home. You have the right to record whatever you want here," Harry reassured me. "So I have nothing to worry about? Is that what you're saying?" I questioned. "No, that's not what I'm saying. We need to be extremely cautious. I did some research on my way here. Chris was kind enough to drive and handle the takeout. It turns out our guy Kramer is the son of the founder of their law firm. You were aware of this, right?" Harry explained, and I nodded. What you might not know is that his father, Marvin Kramer, had quite a reputation. He wasn't a great lawyer, but most of the judges in the area were his former college buddies. Knowing everyone personally made it easy for him to win most of his cases. Unfortunately, his son Derek has followed in his footsteps. That's what makes him dangerous. He has a wide network of friendly judges, and if he files a case, getting a judgment in our favor will be extremely challenging, no matter how illegal his actions are. Wow, so you're saying that no matter what I do, I'm in trouble? Not necessarily. Winning will be challenging, but not impossible. I have connections too, you know. The key is to gather enough evidence to make a strong case against him. I've got a plan. But you mentioned that the judges will always side with him, I inquired. Unless we take the case to criminal court, that's what we'll aim for. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock on the front door. A petite brunette was waiting on the porch. "Hello, Mr. Morrison?" she asked. "Hi, Laura, come on in," Harry called out behind me. "Kenneth, meet Laura Foster. She's the computer specialist at the private investigator firm we collaborate with." I took the liberty of reaching out to her after our earlier call tonight. We briefed Laura on the situation and had her review the recorded conversation, particularly the part where Kramer threatened to upload incriminating material to my computer. Laura paid close attention and then outlined the plan. "All right, there are two possible scenarios. Either they come here during the day, likely with your wife's assistance, sit at your computer, change the date and upload their content, making it appear as if it was done before Kramer's visit. If that happens, your camera system will capture everything. Just ensure it's in record mode before you leave for work in the morning." She pulled a small gray box from her bag. "The other option is remote access to your computer for their mischief. I'll install this module upstream of your modem to record anyone attempting to access your router and monitor what they try to upload or download. Take a few minutes to transfer all your personal or sensitive data and files onto a flash drive, then delete everything on your computer. The goal is to prevent them from accessing it. I'll assist with this just to ensure you don't unintentionally leave any hidden data on the computer," Laura explained confidently. It was evident that she was well-versed in her field. "Let's begin, Kenneth. Currently, your only evidence against him for blackmail is a recording. If you attempt legal action with just that, your case might be dismissed swiftly. Public opinion doesn't view blackmail as a very serious crime, and the judges he knows may support him. The ideal scenario would be if Kramer actually uploaded illegal material to your computer and then reported it to the police, alleging he has evidence of you possessing illegal content. In that case, we would have a trail indicating that all of this occurred without your presence at the computer. With the advance warning you received from Kramer, which you recorded, we would have enough evidence to build a robust case against him in criminal court. His judge friends would be less inclined to support him if he's involved in criminal activities, especially those related to illegal materials with children, and they would distance themselves from him." "I find that disturbing and twisted," I remarked. "Yes, but Kramer is just as twisted. One more thing. Can you refrain from using your computer for the next few days? If Kramer proceeds with his plan and reports you, the police inspectors may want to check the computer records to confirm if anyone accessed the illegal files. Post-upload. If you avoid using it, the records will remain clean, which would be more advantageous for us. Also ensure that your cell phone doesn't connect to your home Wi-Fi in the coming days." To prevent them from using your phone instead of your computer, Laura installed the surveillance module and erased all sensitive information, including my company paperwork from both my computer and cell phone. The module will forward us copies of all access requests. "I'll reach out to Harry and you once we have some information. Best of luck, guys," Laura informed us before leaving. "All right, let's get back to more practical matters," Harry suggested. "Kenneth, do you want to start the divorce process now, or do you prefer waiting until Daphne returns to see if things can be resolved?" "No, I want a divorce as soon as possible. I can't stay married to someone easily influenced and corrupted by self-proclaimed powerful men. No hesitation. I want out." "All right then, I'll contact Claudia Milton tomorrow. She's the family law expert at my office. Good, fair, and efficient. I'll ask her to reach out to you ASAP. You'll like her," Harry assured me. We continued discussing matters, and I provided Harry with the access code to my recording system for real-time updates and cloud-stored information. Christine and Harry departed around 11 p.m. I took a Zopiclone and fell asleep within half an hour. At 8:30 the following day, Claudia Milton called me after concluding a conversation with Harry, who had detailed the specifics of my situation. She requested my presence in her office by 11 a.m. During our meeting, Claudia expressed sympathy for my predicament upon learning about Derek Kramer's questionable reputation. She reassured me that since I had purchased the house before meeting Daphne and her name wasn't on the deed, the property remained mine. With no children in the picture, the divorce proceedings would be straightforward. Concerned about my company, I inquired about the possibility of being forced to sell it and divide the proceeds. Claudia summoned Harry to address my concerns, and he promptly assured us, "Don't worry. The marriage contract clearly stipulates that your company is solely yours and she has no claim to it. They might attempt, but I double-checked and legally they have no grounds." I concluded the meeting with Claudia at 12:30, handling financial matters as instructed. She took charge of the situation, assuring me that everything was under control and Daphne would be served the divorce papers at her office on Monday. Later, I replaced my damaged cell phone and spent the remainder of the weekend tending to the yard and catching up on my favorite TV series. Despite my ongoing anger towards Daphne, I struggled to fully comprehend the reality of the situation. While I anticipated mourning the marriage eventually, at that moment, my emotions were still too raw. The thought of Daphne returning home on Sunday loomed, and I debated whether to sleep in the guest room or assign it to her. Ultimately, I decided that it was my house, and she had walked out on me. Refusing to share my bed with her, I relocated all her belongings to the guest room. Subsequently, I purchased a new lockable doorknob and installed it on my bedroom door, keeping the key in my pocket. Upon hearing Derek's car arrive the following evening, I activated the surveillance system to record. I witnessed Daphne engaging in a prolonged French kiss with her boss before exiting the car and waving as he drove away. I was seated in the living room, apparently engrossed in a book, when she entered. "Hi, honey. How was your weekend?" she asked, seeming anxious. Despite her attempt to conceal it, I could tell that she wasn't as composed as she appeared. I refrained from acknowledging her, keeping my focus on my book. "Fine. Continue with your sulking. Derek was spot on when he mentioned you would act this way, suggesting you lack the intelligence to understand my needs or the maturity to accept your shortcomings." She ascended the stairs. As she left, I began counting. 1, 2, 3. "Kenneth Morrison, what's going on? Did you put a lock on our bedroom?" "Correction, on my bedroom," I responded calmly. "All your belongings are in the guest bedroom. You'll be staying there until you find an apartment." "What the hell? Wait until I tell Derek about this. This was not part of the agreement." "Agreement? What agreement? I haven't agreed to any of your partner's nonsense. Either you stay in the guest room or leave. Perhaps Kramer's wife can accommodate you in her marital bed." She glared at me, not uttering a word, stormed into the guest room and slammed the door. I followed her upstairs, yelling through the door, "Speaking of agreements, what was in it for me, by the way?" No response. I returned upstairs. After 15 minutes, my phone began buzzing with text messages from an unfamiliar number. "What's this I hear, cuck? You won't let Daphne into her own room. I thought I explained things clearly to you. Even someone like you should comprehend. For tonight, I'll overlook your childish crisis. Tomorrow, you'll prepare Daphne's favorite dinner and apologize for your behavior. If you behave the rest of the week, I'll permit her to be in bed with you next weekend. Fail to comply and you'll discover my threats are genuine. Follow my instructions. No questions. Clear." I couldn't believe what I was reading. This person bordered on being heartless, delusional, and foolish. I chose not to respond, but took a screenshot of the conversation and sent it to Harry. Harry responded 3 minutes later, saying, "Incredible. This guy thinks he's top-notch, but he's just a first-rate idiot. Keep the conversation intact and don't bother replying to him." Kramer continued to send a couple more acknowledgement requests, to which I remained silent. Eventually, he stopped reaching out. I didn't encounter Daphne again that evening. I went to bed, securing the door and leaving the recording system on, I texted one of my assistants, informing him of my late arrival the following day. I waited until the morning after Daphne had departed before getting up and preparing for the day. While having breakfast, I downloaded the recordings from my system overnight. Daphne hadn't left the guest room until that morning. She had used the guest bathroom for a shower and left without eating breakfast. Surprisingly, she hadn't attempted anything with my computer. As expected, I received a text from Claudia Milton. "Hi, Kenneth. Just confirming that the divorce papers will be served at Tenkodor this morning. I informed Harry as well. Have as good a day as possible considering everything." Before heading to the shop, I ensured my home system was still recording and set to send alerts to my phone. If activated, I had an 11 a.m. meeting with the architect to discuss final modifications for my current client. I kept myself busy with minor tasks until the meeting. I anticipated a call from Daphne shortly after being served, but it never came. At 10:45, I messaged Harry, expressing surprise at Daphne's lack of contact. "This means she's talked to Kramer about the divorce papers. They might already be scheming. I'll call Laura. Stay tuned," Harry replied. The meeting proceeded smoothly, allowing me to stay focused, surprisingly. I spent the remainder of the afternoon maintaining my tools and tidying up the shop. At 3:12 p.m., I received an alert on my cell phone. I texted Harry that the show was in motion. He responded with a thumbs up. I accessed my system and watched the live events unfolding in my house. Daphne had returned, accompanied by an unfamiliar man. They entered our home office and activated my computer. Minimal conversation was exchanged between them. The man spent a few minutes decrypting my password, then inserted a flash drive into my computer and engaged in suspicious activities for about 10 minutes. Thankfully, I captured clear images of his face. Meanwhile, Daphne went to the guest room and packed her belongings in garbage bags, as her suitcases were apparently in the master bedroom closet. Once the man completed his tasks, he shut down the computer and informed Daphne of his departure. She finished packing and left the premises. At 3:56 p.m., shortly after the recording ceased, Harry contacted me. "All right, Kenneth. Head home and act normally. I suspect they will involve the police tonight or tomorrow, so be prepared for an inspector's visit. Obtaining a search warrant takes a few hours, so anticipate their arrival tomorrow." "Could I get arrested?" I inquired. "It's a possibility. If it happens, maintain silence. Don't answer any questions. I've already reached out to Stephen Lindsay, a reliable criminal defense lawyer. I've shared all pertinent information, including the recordings. He assures me this will be the easiest case of the year," Harry assured. I provided Harry with the code to control my alarm system recording in case of an arrest. After some more discussion, we concluded our conversation. I felt extremely anxious as I drove home. The evening passed without any police visits, calls from Daphne, or unpleasant messages from Kramer. I made myself a sandwich and ate while watching TV. Although tempted to inform my parents about the situation, I decided to wait until the storm had passed. Explaining computer system tampering and cloud-stored videos to my mother seemed futile and likely to cause unnecessary worry. The next day, while I was at the store, I got another alert saying there was an intruder in my house. Following the same steps as before, I quickly messaged Harry and checked my security system. The police had entered my place and were trying to turn off the alarm. They seemed to have done it successfully because I lost communication. Harry told me he saw what happened and sent the images to Stephen Lindsay. About an hour later, 2 officers came to my shop and arrested me. They handcuffed me and took me away in a police car. They told me my rights and started asking questions, but I chose not to answer. When we got to the station, they took my phone and wallet and put me in a cell with 5 others. There wasn't much talking. Everyone stared at the floor tiles. After about 3 hours, a guard took me to a meeting room to see my lawyer. "What's going on?" I asked the guard. I hadn't told anyone who my lawyer was. The guard didn't say anything and left me alone in the room. 10 minutes later, Derek Kramer walked in. He had a big grin on his face and sat across from me without saying anything. I stared back at him, saying nothing. After he was satisfied with establishing his dominance, he finally spoke. "Now, do you understand the seriousness of the situation?" I stayed quiet. "I asked you a question, Morrison. Answer me, you insignificant bug." Again, I didn't respond. "It's your word against mine, Morrison. A carpenter versus one of the top lawyers in the city. Can you guess what will happen?" he asked, still smirking. Then he got up and left the room. "Okay, it seems like you need some time to process what I've told you. Let's meet again tomorrow morning to discuss further," he said before leaving the room. I was taken back to the cell, now with only 4 others. Later that day, another person came to see me. I was brought back to the same meeting room where a tall blonde man was waiting for me. With a stern expression and a no-nonsense demeanor, he stood up as I entered. "Good afternoon, Kenneth. Nice to meet you. I'm Stephen Lindsay. You can call me Stephen. Harry got in touch with me earlier today saying he had trouble reaching you. Given the situation, we figured you might have been arrested and brought here." I recounted all the events of the day, including the unsettling visit from Derek Kramer. Stephen seemed shocked, but he stayed silent. "Okay, you'll be in front of a judge tomorrow morning. Expect a high bail, but don't worry, Harry will take care of it. I know tonight will be tough, but stay strong. Both Harry and I are here for you. In the meantime, keep refusing to answer their questions. I've officially taken on your case, and I'll make sure Kramer doesn't bother you again." The next day, I appeared before the judge on charges of possessing illegal material involving children, maintaining my plea of not guilty. Bail was set, and I was released later that afternoon. I was restricted from leaving the city or contacting my soon-to-be ex-wife, Derek Kramer, or anyone from their office, but I could work in my shop. My phone and wallet were returned, and Stephen took me for a late lunch where we continued our conversation. I didn't say much at the police station yesterday because I was worried about confidentiality. But after making some calls and doing research, I found out some interesting things about Derek Kramer. Let me give you some reassuring information. Firstly, getting a search warrant takes time, and only after that can they review the found material and get an arrest warrant. In your case, you were brought in before they finished searching your house. Secondly, despite the restrictions on contacting me or Harry, Derek Kramer was allowed to see you. This strongly suggests that the whole thing was planned, which is definitely illegal. But Harry said Kramer has influence over many judges, I pointed out. "Not all of them," he replied with a wink. "You can't make so many friends without making some enemies." "I have no clue what I'll find at home. I hope my wife and her scheming partner didn't take everything." "Don't worry about that. Harry went to your place right after the police left, reactivated the system, and set it to record again. No one came." I went back to the shop to get my car, and then went home for a much-needed shower. The architect had left a message confirming the updated plan had been approved by the client. This was good news, as it meant I could go back to work the next day and keep my mind occupied. When I got home, I found a mess. Every inch had been searched. Besides the tampered computer, I knew they wouldn't find anything incriminating. As I cleaned up, I couldn't help but cry for the first time. Just a week ago, I was a happy man in what I thought was a stable marriage. Now I was a suspect in a crime, facing divorce, and manipulated by my wife's boss. What had I done to deserve this? At least there were no reporters bothering me. They were probably busy with the newly discovered multi-billion-dollar hole in public finances to care about someone like Kenneth. Towards the end of the following week, Stephen finally contacted me with some big news. All charges against me had been dropped. It seemed the assigned inspector, who was particularly sensitive to blackmail issues, wasn't someone to mess with. Despite Derek Kramer's attempts, the inspector swiftly filed charges against him for blackmail, evidence fabrication, and possessing illegal materials with children. As for Daphne, she would be facing conspiracy accusations related to these crimes. Shortly after talking to Stephen, Harry called and invited me to dinner that evening. While on my way to Harry's, Claudia Milton, my family law attorney, reached out to me. "Kenneth, Daphne's lawyer called and said she's ready to sign the divorce papers without changes, but with one condition. She wants a private hour-long meeting with you, suggesting it could be at my office. Although meeting Daphne was the last thing I wanted, I thought it might speed up the divorce process. So I agreed to Claudia's plan." The evening with Harry and Christine was a much-needed break, the first relaxing one in 2 weeks. Christine had prepared a delicious meal of coconut shrimp and rice, which left me feeling peaceful. Upon returning home, the meeting with Daphne was set for the following Wednesday, and despite being the sufferer in this scheme, I couldn't shake off my nerves. When I arrived, Claudia advised me in her office, "Kenneth, I'm not sure about her intentions, but I must warn you, she's facing criminal accusations. Don't give her any ammunition. Be careful of what you say. We can't search her for recording devices, so she might be recording you." "Okay, thanks for the heads up," I replied. Then I was led into a private meeting room where Daphne was already sitting. I expected to encounter the same spiteful and arrogant Daphne I'd known, but she seemed broken. Despite feeling compassionate, memories of her questionable interactions with Kramer quickly dispelled any sympathy I had. "Thank you for meeting with me, Kenneth. After everything, what could you possibly want to say to me?" Her tears began to flow. Daphne expressed regret and apologized to Kenneth for her past behavior, admitting she had been under Derek Kramer's influence. She mentioned feeling awakened upon learning about the dropped charges against Kenneth and the potential accusations they might face. This realization led her to feel deep remorse and shame, especially considering the insignificant nature of the incident. For the next 30 minutes, she continued to reflect on her behavior without asking for any information or probing me further. "I understand. It's over between us, Kenneth. If I were you, I'd seek a divorce too. I don't blame you for ending things. I've quit my job. I made it clear to Derek Kramer I never want to speak to him again. I've gone back to my parents' house and confessed everything. They're furious with me. Let's just say the atmosphere at home is anything but warm and welcoming." I looked at her quietly. Frankly, there was no smart comeback to all of this. She had created her own mess, and now she had to deal with the consequences. The months and maybe even years ahead will be tough for me, Kenneth. I'm not sure what life holds for me. My only hope is that eventually, after everything settles, we might have a chance to be friends. That's a long shot, Daphne. Very long. We'll see how it goes. Best of luck. I got up and left the room. Part of me still cared for her, but reconciliation was out of the question. Despite wanting revenge initially, circumstances had already made her miserable. She had learned her lesson, and there was no need for more punishment. Daphne made a deal by cooperating fully with authorities against Derek Kramer, which led her to move to another city. After that, I lost contact with her. When allegations against Kramer became public, 2 other men came forward, accusing him of blackmail. Kramer got a 12-year jail term as the police had recordings of all my interactions with him. My testimony wasn't needed. After Kramer was convicted, I sued him and what was left of his firm, and I got a $2 million settlement, with a good chunk going to Harry. Despite pretending to be outraged, I was happy to reward Harry for his invaluable help. My company is doing well, and I'm close to acquiring a specialty door manufacturer, which will improve our operations. With 6 employees who feel like family, I'm content. Harry and Christine invited me to a BBQ a few days after my divorce was finalized. There, I met Christine's younger sister, Kathy, and we hit it off immediately. We've been dating for a few weeks, and we'll see where it leads. Several weeks after settling the case against CBH and Kramer, I visited Kramer in jail, making sure the guard made him stay for our chat. I smirked as he entered, starting with a taunt. "What's up, cuck?" Kramer tried to leave, but the guard made him sit and listen. Ignoring his insults, I casually mentioned, "Oh, interesting preemptive strike. Heard your wife, Jessica, filed for divorce. Maybe I should ask her out for dinner and give her a memorable night." Furious, Kramer snapped, "You rogue! If you do that—" I cut him off. "Save your spit, idiot. I've done that already. Her hummingbird tattoo on her upper left thigh is quite lovely, isn't it, cuck?" He turned beet red. He was about to threaten me again, but then he realized it wouldn't help. Anyway, I wasn't there to talk about Jessica. I just wanted to let him know he's a fool who needs reminders of his own foolishness. Threatening a man in his own home and outlining consequences if he doesn't comply isn't exactly smart, is it? Even a carpenter would see that. Let's say this time you're the one left in the dust. I laughed while he simmered with anger. "Oh, and didn't you say certain materials were illegal for a simple man like me? but fine for a powerful figure like yourself? Your power amazes me. Perhaps it's the jumpsuit. It suits you." Kramer was so mad he seemed close to a breakdown. "Before I go, I have something Jessica and Daphne thought you might find enlightening." I handed him a folded paper. He unfolded it and looked at it. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "Exactly." I chuckled. "It's a depiction of female gender organ, commonly referred to as a private part." I pointed to a spot on the drawing. "They wanted you to know that's the arousal point."